All right, we are right at 7 o'clock, so I'll call tonight's city council meeting to order. And Christina, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Roberts.
Here.
Councilmember Erickson.
Here.
Councilmember Valento.
Here.
Mayor Bain.
Here. I would invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Members of council, we have an agenda before you. I would entertain a motion to approve or any changes.
Also move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose. And our agenda is approved. Our next item this evening is open forum. Open forum is any interested party's opportunity to address council on any topic of your choosing. I will note that we do not have any public hearings scheduled on the meeting this evening, and so if you would like to address council, open forum is your time to do so. I also note that we do have a number of working session discussion topics. When we are upstairs, we have become a little bit more informal in taking some level of public comment and engagement during those discussion topics. Tonight, now that we are in a regular council meeting and we are in chambers, we're in a little bit more of a formal environment. If we are able to keep it managed, I am open to taking some level of council or some level of discussion during those workshop topics. But just please be respectful of the agenda that we have tonight. We have a number of topics that we need to go through. Anything that's going to require a more detailed working session, I would move that we would move that agenda item to another night where we can give a topic the due time. So I am open to taking some brief comments from the public during our discussion period, but again, just want to be respectful of everyone's time. We don't want to be here till curfew at 11 o'clock tonight. And so if there's something that is requiring a fair amount of discussion, let's just move it to another night, again, where we can give it enough time. So with that, if anyone has any planned comments, we are happy to hear them now during open forum. Is there anyone that is signed up? Nobody signed up for open forum? Okay, and is there anybody online for open forum?
There is not.
Okay. With that, we will bring the agenda to council, and council, for your consideration tonight are consent agenda items 6A through 6F. I would move that we move consent agenda item 6D, which is the approve of the plan and specs and authorize to bid for the Airfield pavement maintenance project. I would move that we move that to the regular agenda, and then would move that we approve all of the other consent agenda items. Open to any changes anyone else may have, however. Is there a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the consent agenda signal by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And consent agenda is approved. Next item is former consent agenda item 6D, approve plans and specs and authorized bids. I know we have Silas here tonight. I know also that we have a council that is made up of newer members, and we have not had a lot of airport conversation as a council. So just want an opportunity to hear from Silas on the potential, on the projects that's being proposed. Just so we can have a little bit more of an active conversation. It is typically a consent agenda item, but I think it's worth just some additional consideration. So, Silas, if you don't mind, just kind of walking us through the items that are on the agenda this evening for council's consideration, and
Mayor.
just want an opportunity to highlight.
I'm sorry, if we could hold on for just a minute. So you had moved 6D off of the consent agenda, correct? I'm wondering if you didn't mean also, or maybe
I am
instead
sorry.
6E.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't catch that soon enough.
Yeah, no, and
You want to?
so I had intended both,
Okay.
because I look at them as broader airport projects. We have approved 6E. We could rescind. We could hear Silas's presentation and make a decision after Silas's presentation how we would like to proceed. That would maybe be our best course of action. If we need to rescind the approval, we certainly could. If council is open to consideration, then we would just consider the approval of the item 6D, which was moved. That is my error, my apologies. Council, are we okay with that approach? All right. Silas, we're really glad you're here.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. Appreciate the opportunity to present on two airport projects that are proposed for the Forest Lake Airport. So I'll start with the Airfield Pavement Maintenance Project. So in 2016, the city made a significant investment at the airport, which converted the runway, which used to be a turf runway, into a paved runway, 2,700 feet in length, 75 feet in width. Associated with the improvement of paving the runway was construction of a paved parallel taxiway, which allows aircraft access to the runway while not restricting use of the runway to other aircraft that are either taking off or landing. So pretty significant investments for the city. The Airport Commission in 2018 then elected to pass a resolution for a pavement management plan, because what the Airport Commission wanted to do was make sure that the city was protecting the investment that they made in paving the runway and the taxiway at the airport. So Bolton and Mank supported the Airport Commission in creating a pavement management plan to keep the pavement in good condition for a minimum of 20 years, so the city would not have to complete a reconstruction project of the pavement. So the first of those projects was completed in 2019, which was a crack repair project, which essentially sealed any cracks that had opened up on the surface of the pavement, applied a seal coat to kind of prolong the life of the pavement, and then applied new pavement markings. The next project in the series for the pavement management plan is a project that's proposed before council tonight for authorization of the plan, specs, and authorization for bid, and that to complete another crack repair project. So to go back out there and investigate any of the cracks that have formed since the previous project, make sure they're sealed to prevent premature deterioration of the pavement, and then also to reseal any of the cracks that were previously sealed under the 2019 project. And the intent there is to make sure that the runway, taxiway, apron, and then the hangar taxi lanes remain in good condition to protect the investment in the pavements there. So how the airport receives funding is through MnDOT Aeronautics. So being that Forest Lake is an airport that does not receive federal funds, so you're limited to the use of state funds. In those situations, MnDOT provides a higher participation rate for projects at the airport. So MnDOT is proposing to fund the project at a 95% state share and a 5% local share for the pavement maintenance project, and then also the second project that I'll discuss here shortly. So we put together the bidding documents. We have an engineer's estimate for the project, including construction and engineering, of $56,700, of which the local share 5% would be $2,835. So we're proposing to authorize for bid and open the projects for bids on May 8th, and then subsequently bring the apparent low bidder to council for approval. So I'll pause there if any members of council have questions about the pavement maintenance project proposed.
Just quick clarification, the city's portion comes out of the airport fund, is that correct?
I'm not sure where the share of the city's portion is funded. I'll deflect to Administrator Handt for that.
Thank you.
Yes, Mayor and Council, the city's portion comes out of the airport fund.
Thank you. That was my only question on the maintenance plan. Should we move on to talk about the taxiway project?
Sure, certainly. Thank you. So the next project that's also proposed at the airport is an extension of taxiway Alpha 3, and then also an extension of taxi lane Bravo. So in 2020, the city completed an airport master plan update for the airport, which essentially is a roadmap for planning, the next 20 years of projects at the airport. So this was a project completed in conjunction with MnDOT, who provided a state grant to fund kind of the future planning for the projects at the airport, and also was a collaborative effort between City Council, pilots of the airport, and the state of Minnesota to come together with a comprehensive plan to lay out the future development of the airport. Through that study, there were three primary projects that MnDOT and the Airport Commission wanted addressed immediately. One of those projects was completed last year with an expansion of the apron to allow for aircraft to park in a hard surface. Previously, aircraft that were visiting the airport had to park in the grass, which made it kind of difficult if there was adverse weather conditions, like today where we had rain in the morning. So that project was completed last year with support from MnDOT. The next two projects that were identified is extension of taxiway Alpha 3. So in your packet, there's kind of a map that's kind of showing the projects. It's a little bit easier to see on the figure, but I'll start with kind of the taxiway Alpha 3 extension. So for those of you kind of familiar with the airport, the south side of the airport is where all the private hangars are currently constructed. A couple of years ago, there was a large hangar also constructed off the main apron. With the construction of that new hangar, there's a lot of congestion to access the airfield. So one of the projects that was recommended through the master plan study was to complete an extension of taxiway Alpha 3, which is on the south end of the runway 31 end of the airport. Essentially, consider this as just providing an alternate access to the runway for the private hangar owners in the south hangar area, so that they aren't restricted by any aircraft that are either taking on fuel or operating, at the large box hangar there. So that's a project that was recommended to alleviate congestion and make access to the airfield smoother for a number of pilots there. The other associated project with that is the extension of taxi lane Bravo, kind of moving to the north side of the existing apron. And what this project would do is allow the city the potential to sell 4 additional hangar lots for private hangar owners. Currently, all the available hangar lots at the airport are leased out, and I believe there's a waiting list of over 20 pilots desiring to base their aircraft at the Forest Lake Airport and, in addition, construct their own private hangar. So what this project will do is extend the taxi lane 240 feet to the north to allow for the addition of 4 private hangar lots, of which sanitary and water main utilities will be extended to each one of those lots to allow the private hangar owners connection to water and sewer. So those are the other 2 projects that are proposed. Similar to the pavement maintenance project, they will receive 95% state funding, 5% local share. And the estimated project cost, including construction and engineering, is $485,250, with the local share being $24,262. So similarly, I'm requesting council approval of the plans and specs and authorization to bid. Bids for that project would also be opened on May 8th and then brought before council at the May 13th meeting for approval of the low bidder. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions about the taxiway Alpha 3 or taxi lane Bravo extension projects.
Thank you. Council, open it up. Any questions that you may have? Go ahead.
So when we did the actual paving of the runways, there was an issue with the engineering, and then it was an overrun. Is there some backup, or who picks up if there's any overruns and cost on this? Is that a split 95-5, like the project itself, or does the state pick up more of that, or how does that work?
Correct. If there are any change orders that occur during construction for either of the projects, the city has the ability to amend the grant to allow the participation rates to remain. So the state would contribute 95% of the any additional cost, and then the local share would be 5% for those.
Your staff memo references the ability, this project allows for the ability of the extension of the 4 additional hangars. What is the airport project plan? What timeline does that anticipate for those hangars to be available to be built? Is this the last project that's needed for that sequence to happen, or are there additional actions that would need to happen?
Are you, Madam Mayor, are you saying in terms of allowing then these hangar lots to be constructed upon?
Yeah.
So I would anticipate construction of this project, if moving forward, will be completed either in August or September, and immediately thereafter, the lots would be available for lease for construction to begin thereafter.
Okay, there's no other infrastructure that's needed for that to happen. This is kind of the missing piece.
Correct. This is the missing piece to construct the taxi lane for them to access their hangar and then extend the utilities.
Perfect. And then, just because whenever we're talking about expansion at the airport, or, I guess expansion at the airport, some, public always asks questions related to aircraft size. We're not doing anything on this project that would expand aircraft size, right? Like, this is existing planned, kind of aircraft that we see today would be future users even after this project. Is that right?
That's correct. The size of the aircraft that can operate at Forest Lake is limited to the length of the runway of 2,700 feet. So this will be likely your single-engine aircraft that are your leisure travelers that are operating around the Forest Lake area.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for making the trip here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So council, we had previously approved item 6E, and I would move that council approve consent agenda items 6D. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? And motion carries. All right, moving into our regular agenda, first for council's consideration, item 7A, accept donation from the American Legion Post 225 for resolution 482401, and Chief Newman.
Mayor, members of the council, we received a generous donation of $1,000 from the American Legion Post 225. Staff recommendation is to accept this donation with gratitude.
Thank you, Chief. I would move that council approve resolution 482401 with gratitude. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next is 7B, accept donation from Fairway Mechanical DBA Auto Works as part of resolution 482402, and also Chief Newman.
Mayor, members of the council, we received this donation from Forest Lake Fairway Mechanical, doing business as Forest Lake Auto Works. Staff recommendation is to accept this donation with gratitude as well.
Thank you, Chief. I would move that council approve resolution 482402 with gratitude. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? Motion carries. Next for consideration, Council 7C, which is the 2025 budget calendar. Kevin, how are we at budget time already?
Mayor and city council members, that's exactly what I was going to say. Even though we just started 2024, staff has already started to look at the 2025 budget and plan out that schedule. An important piece of that is this budget calendar. It lays out the expectations not only for the city council, but also staff, so everyone's aware of the timelines that need to be met based on giving staff sufficient time to get the document pulled together and also meeting the required dates of the county and state as we work through that. So what we're looking for the council tonight is approval of the budget calendar and any input that you have on that, as well as what budget direction you would like to give to staff tonight as well. Based on what the staff prepared last year and was approved by city council, looking at our 10-year plan, that projected levy increase was about 14%. So what staff is looking for is city council so comfortable with that as a starting point when we are looking at the 2025 budget? And also, is there any suggestions that they have on the budget calendar as presented? Just to note, currently, where we're at is next week, we will be presenting a long-range plan on staffing. And then on May 20th at a workshop is when we would like to have that direction from council on their list of priorities for what you would like to see in that preliminary budget. So we have time to incorporate that with our long-term plans as it relates to streets, equipment, parks, staffing needs, and other needs of the city to get ready for that preliminary budget that's presented in August. Also, this to keep on city council members' minds is we would like to know if you would like to hold another budget open house as you did last year in November. Last year, just given the timing of when that was decided to happen, it was a little bit of a crunch to get that completed. So the sooner we know that, if that's something we want to plan for, it makes it more efficient planning and can get that worked into our calendar. So with that, like I said, we're just looking for input on the budget calendar and approval of that, as well as direction on the 2025 budget that the city council has.
Thank you, Kevin. Council, should we start maybe with the easier of the questions, which is the calendar? Thank you for providing this level of detail, Kevin. Council, as you look at the process that is being proposed, topics by day, I'm open to feedback that you may have.
I thought the calendar looked good.
I think it looks good too.
Yeah, I would agree. I welcome the heads up on this. That didn't happen last year, so this is good.
Yeah, I would agree. I also, the question around the budget workshop,
Workshop or open house.
or the workshop, the budget open house, I feel that while I could say, if you look at the number of meetings that are on our calendar between now and then, there's certainly a lot of opportunity for public input and public engagement. However, in experience, we know that there is a lot of moving pieces in those conversations, and it's really not until September and then into the fourth quarter that we have a full picture of what's actually being proposed and kind of top priorities. And so for those reasons, to have an opportunity to do that presentation to the community, I think is valuable. Now, I hope the community is plugged in as we go and providing feedback, but again, to do the top line conversation, I feel like last year's meeting was a little later than maybe what would be preferable, and so if we could plan for even September, maybe a little early, but that from a timeline perspective of when we are approving, having that level of feedback as we are considering that preliminary levy might be a bit optimistic on timeline, but certainly in October, once we've done the preliminary levy, maybe we're talking mid to late October would be a better timeline than, as late as we did it last year. It's hard to have that public, until council has made a decision and has reached consensus, it's hard to have a workshop of here's what the proposal is. But after we've done that preliminary levy, I think is a great time to at least workshop or to have the open house on what's included in the preliminary levy. And that certainly can help to kind of inform council's kind of next versions of that conversation as we drive towards formal adoption. So a lot of words to say October. Is that where we are?
Sounds good.
Kevin, does that timing work for you? If we were to
Yes,
plan for?
Mayor, that timing does work. Not necessarily was looking for an answer on that open house, but just wanted to get it on the radar for that. But it does seem like the general consensus is that we want to schedule that. And I agree, last year was a little late just putting that together. We want opportunity, if we go that direction, to not only hear feedback from the citizens of Forest Lake, but also then provide feedback between staff and council members from what they heard there as well. So given that timeline, that makes a lot more sense in my opinion, as well. So unless I hear otherwise, we will plan on getting that scheduled and communicate that out when we feel a good time to do that will be.
On to the trickier part of the conversation, feedback as far as starting spot for levy. And again, this is a very preliminary conversation. If I can, speak from experience, this is kind of a gut check on what's the mindset going into budget season, and certainly looking at the projected levies that were planned as part of the 10-year plan is a good starting spot. Open to feedback that council may have.
Well, I mean, we worked very hard last year to land where we did, which was significantly higher than anything we've done in recent history. I think this is a good starting spot. We knew going into last year that there were some major things that, we as a body and as a city needs to do, and that hasn't changed. And so, I fully expect that we'll see some revisions to this, but I think I'm fine with it as a starting point.
Good feedback. Other points of consideration?
I'm good with it as a starting point. I mean, we have to start somewhere, and with the 10-year financial plan being relatively new for the city, and as we worked super hard on the budget last year, since that is the starting point for this year, I would like to stick with that just so that we can even remind ourselves of the conversations from last year, see where we ended up, how that impacted how we got to this number from last year, and just continue that conversation forward.
I would agree.
Yeah. The one, as I look at the 10-year plan, the one thing that, so we had originally, when we passed the preliminary levy, the mindset was, we know this is going to be a spike, so let's make it a spike so that future years, we don't need to continue a plateau. And I'm a little concerned that we do have a plateau developing in that the number for 2025 is one thing, but that actually goes up in current projections for 2026. And so I think that's part of what I think what we need to wrap our heads around is, are we comfortable with this 3-year plateau number, or because then after the plateau, then numbers do come down nicely. And I know we've got a lot of work to do, but I think kind of looking ahead to what is the trajectory is part of what we need to keep our eye on. So I think it's a good place to start. I'm a little concerned with us projecting out that level without having clear, and this is also where that 10-year plan comes in, have the conversations about the projects that are in that 10-year plan. Some of them are in the room tonight, frankly, to just really continue to evolve so that we're not just talking about a percentage, but we're talking about actual timing of projects and things in the ground. I think helps us to get comfortable on what the right timing is. And so a lot of words to also say, I think this is a good place to start. Any other points of feedback related to budget? Kevin, Christina, everybody, does that give you what we need to get started?
Yes, it does.
Fantastic. All right, moving into our workshop topics.
Don't we have one more?
Oh, I'm sorry. We do have one more action item, and that is 7D, consideration of housing legislation resolution, which is resolution 482403. And I believe
Yeah,
Christina?
so- Mayor and Council, we've brought it up a couple times during our reports here over the last month about legislation that is being proposed and moving through various committees down at the Capitol that would increase densities, require multifamily housing in commercial areas, not allow us to have parking requirements, and a bunch of other things that intends to make housing more affordable, but certainly take some of the decision-making authority away from local governments and can shift some of the cost burden onto our current residents. And so, as a number of other cities are doing, I've prepared in your packet a resolution that would support retaining Forest Lakes zoning authority, but also, recognizing that we need to work with the state on constructive policy alternatives to incentivize and bolster city efforts for addressing housing challenges and advocating for a city-state partnership to consider reforms that are proven to address housing availability and affordability, and that ensures efforts can be locally led and shaped. So with that, I will take any questions. I know we've talked about this a few times. I know that as the legislature continues to do their work, things are always evolving, and so we tried to very purposefully have a generic, if you will, resolution that doesn't call out any specific bills or specific initiatives, but just that idea that decision-making should be held here in the local community, public hearings, as you're often used to hearing, which at one point in time was something the legislature proposed taking away so that there wouldn't even be that opportunity to have conversation. We heard late last week, this effort may be dead in the House, but you never know what happens with omnibus bills as we get towards the end of session. And so for those reasons, I would still recommend that you adopt this resolution tonight, and we can send this off to our state legislators.
Thank you, Christina. Council, any questions on the resolution that is proposed tonight, or any follow-up feedback?
I'm just grateful that you drafted it in pretty quick order, and it's critical for local cities to be able to retain that control.
Yeah, I would echo, and I would hope that this is an area where the legislature does not remove or lessen local government's ability to make these types of decisions. It's certainly something we take very seriously here within Forest Lake. We have great public engagement to help us guide and shape what's needed for Forest Lake. And also appreciate that this is broad enough that I think these are just foundational principles that I'm happy to support tonight. Any other points of conversation? Ready for a motion if anyone's ready?
Also move that we pass resolution 4/8/2403.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? And motion carries. Okay, with that, we are going to move into the discussion portion of our agenda this evening. This is going to be a more informal working session of council. Anything that we talk about on tonight on these topics this evening that require official action will actually come back before council for, on an official agenda for official vote. So we will be much more informal in our approach. And I am happy to, as we're talking about topics, take very limited public comment. But again, let's keep an eye on the clock and be respectful of time this evening. With that, are we ready for our first workshop topic? All right, our first workshop topic is the M Health Annual Update, and Chief Newman.
Mayor and Council, since June 1st, 2020, M Health has been our service provider for ambulance service in Forest Lake and surrounding communities. Every year after June 2021, they've been in to provide an annual report of the services that they provide. So tonight we have Chief Edmondson and Deputy Chief Kane here to provide you their annual update.
Perfect.
In your packet, you'll have a copy of the operational report.
Very good. Thank you. Welcome. The podium is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. As you said, my name is Tom Edmondson. I'm the Chief of EMS for M Health Fairview, and Kevin Kane is our District Chief for what we call our Northern Region. So as you may know, our Northern Region consists of Forest Lake, Centerville, Hugo, Wyoming, Linwood. I don't know why I was saying Linville, and Scandia. So you should have the presentation in front of you. I apologize in advance. It's kind of boring as far as our numbers. Kevin gets to do the more exciting stuff and talk about our involvement in the community. So I get the task of giving you the boring details. So if you look at our entire PSA in this region last year, from January 1st to the end of December, we had a total of 4,910 overall 911 requests, which equates to about 13.45 calls per day in that 911 area. Going through this list, it's the same for both our region, and I'll break it down for just Forest Lake for you as well. But if you look at this total number, you can see we provided and gave a lot of mutual aid to our surrounding communities as well. We gave 406 mutual aid calls, and we received a total of 216 calls for mutual aid. Breaking this down, we did make it to the scene 4,445 times, and I like to show the total number or percentage of our emergency transports that's transporting to the hospital lights and sirens. It kind of gives you the idea of the acuity of the patients that we're seeing, and our number is relatively low. At 6.3% of the transports were emergent. Breaking this down, we show it by response type, which again, it's kind of boring, but Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo is the International Emergency Medical Dispatching breakdown of calls. We respond to Alphas and Bravos without lights and sirens. We do a lot of work to try to reduce the amount of times we turn those lights and sirens on because it is dangerous to ourselves and the community we serve. And then Charlie, Delta, and Echo are our emergent responses. Those are the calls we initially start out responding lights and sirens, although that may be upgraded or downgraded throughout the response. Overall, in that PSA, we had a emergent response, and that's, again, just lights and sirens, of 8 minutes and 20 seconds on average. And then all of our 911 calls together were at 8 minutes and 53 seconds. The next page is really what you probably care about, is just the city of Forest Lake. You can see the overall calls were significantly lower, at 2,131, which is about 5.8 per day. We did get canceled prior to our arrival 123 times. We used mutual aid 90 times, and as we talked about in our last slide there, you can see the number of mutual aid we provide to surrounding communities directly impacts how many times we call for mutual aid as well. We did make it to the scene 1,944 times, and again, showing that emergent transport was at 81 or 6.1%. Again, there's a breakdown there if you really like the numbers of our emergent versus non-emergent. But the meat and potatoes of it there is really our response times. Our emergent response time to the city of Forest Lake was 6 minutes and 36 seconds on average, and our overall time was at 7 minutes flat. And this was, again, from January 1st to the end of December. I know this report, if you start to add up the numbers, you may not get the right ones because we show December of 2022 just as a relation to December of 23, but those weren't included in the totals. And I'll let Kevin kind of go through some of the much more fun stuff for you.
Thank you, Mayor Bain and the City Council. Thank you for having us this evening. So, as Chief Newman said, we've been up here in this area since June of 2020. And since then, I think almost without any meetings missed, we've been meeting with Chief Newman as well as the Forest Lake Police Department to go over these numbers and talk about any concerns or issues that we may have. But as Chief Edmondson just discussed, the 911 calls is just a portion of what we do, and really the involvement with the community is a large portion of it as well. So I want to highlight some of those items. We participate with the safety camp every single year. We come out with our ambulances, our facility dog Clayton, who's not with me right now, I apologize, and show those kids like kind of what our trucks do and to not be frightened or scared when they see us out in public. We do offer trainings to the police department and fire department free of charge, so that their medical trainings are taken care of through mHealth. We also do a lot with the 4th of July festivities in Forest Lake, so we are involved with planning that, up staffing, and making sure that goes smooth and safe for everybody. So any questions for us?
Any questions? Response times year over year, what direction are we heading, and anything we can do to help you with that, or any trends that worth noting?
Yeah, I can take that. So our response times, I believe, have gone down slightly year over year. We look at that. I don't have the numbers with me, so I apologize. I didn't come prepared for that. But we do constantly look at the times, our total responses, both in Forest Lake and for our whole PSA. And we make tweaks to our deployment, our staffing model, and our locations that we staff as needed, as they come up. So we make drastic changes to that as we need to. We do also, we just implemented a new software last year. So we've been alive for a year on it now. So it's basically been collecting data, and it uses artificial intelligence to really do call predictivity. So it will show us and predict where those call volumes will be. That part is just on, it's turned live actually beginning of this month, and it's just in a testing phase right now. And we hope to implement that and start kind of posting our trucks slightly different to where the predicted calls will be. So it is very near and dear to us, and we look at that pretty much every month on how we can improve.
Very good, thank you. Council, any other questions we may have? Just a quick comment, this topic comes up every time we're talking about fire staffing, so our partnership is really, really important. You are a critical part to us maintaining our paid-on-call model on the fire side. Our budget conversation would look much different if you weren't here doing this work, so we appreciate it, so thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
All right, we are ready for our next workshop topic, which is discussion on the Veterans Memorial, and Jamie.
Thank you, Mayor Bain and Council. I'm here tonight to talk about the Veterans Memorial Project. We have a committee here in Forest Lake that we do have a couple members here in person and one virtually representing the Veterans Memorial Committee. I serve on the committee as our staff liaison and work with the committee guiding any discussion that involves staff relating to the project. So I'm just going to go over a quick background for people that are here tonight, and then just going to talk a little bit about kind of where we're at with the project and some feedback from council to guide next steps. So just a little bit of background. The Veterans Memorial Committee was started in 2008 and has been selling pavers throughout the years. The sale of the pavers, you can order a small or large paver. Those pavers get installed at Lakeside Memorial Park. The revenue that we've been generating through the paver sales has been in a restricted account. The city is the fiscal agent for this group. So we've been holding on to the money and have had about $65,000 in revenue over the years. As council is aware from our last time talking about this last November, The group did seek out funding from the state and received some significant funding from the state, $250,000 through the bonding bill and $100,000 in the legacy fund. So that was a really big win for this committee to really, have some substantial funding to really kind of get this project, to that finish line that has been in works for a long time. So that has kind of necessitated this conversation of where do we go next? And one of the, where we're at right now is we're really looking at the location of the project. As we've have this larger funding source, we've put a preliminary budget together of about $450,000, but as we've continued these conversations, the area at Lakeside Memorial Park that has been designated for this project for several years and was included in the downtown revitalization plan would require some underground water relocation for the project. So that was something that we identified as we've continued to move forward in this project. With that comes a hefty price tag of about $130,000 to do that underground utility work for the project to remain in that desired location. So where we are at, the committee, along with staff, over the last few months have really evaluated that premier location, and we have considered 3 alternative locations. So we've met recently, included in the packet, you'll see the 4 different locations that we've reviewed and analyzed as a potential other location for the Veterans Memorial Project. As you can see in the staff memo here, option 1 is the original location right off of the roundabout, which has been approved in the downtown plan. We do have an option 2, which would be essentially that same area, but if we reduce the size of the project and offset it just a little bit, we can, we could potentially have it fit there, but it would require reducing the overall project size and kind of offsetting it from the downtown roundabout. That is an option we've looked at. The third option we discussed was the City of Forest Lake property, which is on the corner of Broadway Avenue West and Highway 61. You'll see there's a parcel that is city property. There were some benefits of that location. However, the committee really feels that this is a memorial for Lakeside Memorial Park and that it really should be in the park. So not the most desirable location from the committee perspective. And then option 4 is an area on the other side of the park, closer to the boat launch, which you can see in the packet. There would not be any private utilities there that would require any additional cost or work associated with that. So those are the 4 options that we've reviewed as a committee and with staff. And again, as stated previously, the committee still really prefers option 1, that location that's been intended for a long time. Again, it's already approved as part of the downtown plan. It's really well established. The pavers have been installed at that site for a long time. People know that's the Veterans Memorial site. It's most visible from the downtown area, and it's just really a central area. And part of the intent with this memorial is not only for people to come there to memorialize one of their family members, but it's also to provide an educational opportunity for the community. So people that might just be to the park with family or from out of town or with children, seeing this memorial and to have that be an educational opportunity. And that's really a good location for that. In closing, before I turn it over to discussion, option 1 is definitely the preferred. Option 2 and 4 are certainly for discussion. But they would really like it to be in the park. So we're not really too excited about option 3 at the moment. The last piece for tonight, so the first part of the council discussion will be the location and weighing in on some conversation there. The second part of this tonight is really the financial contribution or potential support from the city for this project. As stated, the project budget is around $450,000. The cost to relocate the water line is about $130,000, but there's also more costs for construction management documents. So estimated at about $200,000 for the work associated with the water line relocation. So that would be construction documents, engineering cost, managing the project, and the actual like relocating of the water line as well. So with that, the questions or issues before council, which location, or do you have any comments or feedback for staff or the committee on the location of the project? And if there would be, some discussion on financial support of the Veterans Memorial Project. You will see the fiscal impact and some recommendations from staff on where that funding could come from. Again, that's just a high-level recommendation at this time. If this would be something that the council would be favorable to or open to discuss, it would then impact the 10-year financial plan, and that would need to be modified for some of those projects we've had slated in for 2025 and beyond. So we would need to look at that. So with that being said, I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I'd like to turn it over for council for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. I said Abby.
That's
I'm
okay.
Sorry. As we are considering, councilors, just open it up for any questions that we may have for Jamie. I'm sure Abby's happy to weigh in as well. Any questions you may have before we kind of dive into individual?
Yeah, just a couple. In option one versus option two, you noted that going to option two, it reduces the diameter to 40 feet. What's the current model in option one? What size is that?
I think it was around just under 60. So I think it was in like 50, was it 55, 58 feet diameter, I believe it was.
Ron
We're getting a
is
nod.
nodding.
So Ron,
Is it?
I believe it was just under 60 feet, so. And as noted with option two, Dave Adams, Public Works Director, did okay this reduction in size, but there would be this 3-foot encroachment, which isn't ideal, but it is definitely something that they would be comfortable with. So there is that component to it, and if we would go with that route.
And then if option two were the direction we went, what is the ask? What's the cost are we looking at? Are we alleviating any costs?
If there was option two, it would not require the water line relocation. So the $130,000 for that portion of the project, we would then just be looking at roughly $70,000 for construction documents, engineering, construction management, kind of that bucket of work.
And that's for the memorial itself, regardless of where it's at? option one
Correct.
through four?
Correct.
Okay.
Can somebody spell out a little bit more in a little bit more meaningful way? What is our impact of that 3-foot encroachment? Like, what does that do for us or not do? What does that prohibit?
When we put a water line in, we want 10 feet on each side. This would shrink it down to 7. We could repair it with a box to do the repairs, but typically we wouldn't want encroachment. So, I mean, like, that's what I said, that 3 feet would be the most we'd allow, but we could still get down to the water main, but typically we wouldn't want that within 10 feet of the main.
Are you able to do any future work with the same equipment, or would it require future equipment modifications?
It would require a trench box. We just have to put a trench box on that south side to do that work. I don't think it would limit it, but we don't want any more going into there. I think that's, like in my memo, it said that's the most we would allow before we would consider that getting into the easement. So I think the fair trade that we let them get into that, but not any farther than
can't go
that
any
before
further.
you'd have to relocate.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions before we open up a specific? Gentlemen, is there anything you'd like us to consider at this time, or any additional comments you'd like to make to council? Always happy to hear your thoughts.
The item or location number one is definitely the most preferred. You know, when you look down the sight line of Broadway, coming down to the lake, think about the lake, and you're looking at this, and then behind this is the restroom area, and of course there's the big lake. When you're going down 61, from north and south, how many places along there can you see the lake? Very, very, very few, you know, especially when the leaves are there. So that is a prime spot when you get to Broadway and 61. It's a prime spot to look that way, and this way you're going to see a memorial, and it's a memorial that you can look through to see the water on the other side. So one thought in my mind is the bathrooms. It's great to have bathrooms in here where the beach is, whatever. That makes sense. But if there's going to be another bathroom or whatever, think about the boat launch and the rental places there for boats. We want people to come off the lake and not pee in the lake. So in other words, there should be a bathroom that's close to where they are by a boat launch. So if there's another one or whatever, it can be whatever size you want to do it. And then the other part about that for that location number 4 of being in the boat launch area is that is a big open area that if someday there's going to be an amphitheater or something else, there's all kinds of things that we could, city-wise, we could put there that would make a lot of sense to be there versus the memorial where everybody can see it and you can still see the lake. So that's that. And then related to that, you know, it's okay. Let's go ahead and spend the money. Let's put it in the right place and the right time and all, and get it the best.
Mark Finneman. My opinion, and I do have those. The location we chose originally is the best location, the most logical location. It's worth fighting for and it's worth investing in. And there's a rationale behind that. We can dig into that. But I'd like you to just take a moment to think about the park in total and its future potential, if you want to realize the future potential. We can follow even the lead of the planners that came and did a report on the whole downtown, the downtown section. They made 2 points about the park. Probably the only 2 salient points they made was that essentially, if you did move the bathhouse, you don't have to do it now. I would say keep it alive until you make a decision about it. But there's another logical, central, utility-oriented position for it to be in, central to the park. Just has to be talked about. You have a chance to begin a brand new story with that and follow the national park kind of model where they take these seasonal things and they make them concise and they make them personality oriented. You have a chance for a new horizon there. And when you free up that spot, it's just not an object between 2 sides of a park anymore. You have this large panoramic view of a park, and that will enhance and expand the sense of that park dramatically. Go on down to the north end and take advantage again of the other planners' thoughts. Someday maybe you want to take a load off the lake, and maybe you would take over that territory that's now the public land, the landing, maintain access to drive onto the lake, but put that into the park. Gain all of that potential that now the park could have, make the amphitheater there, do something there that's an activity that draws people through the park. That all makes sense. And so the site that we're choosing is fundamentally on the east-west axis of the north-south axis that the park sets up. And pay attention to geometry sometimes. It makes a lot of sense. That position, it's hard to pick that one position where you slide over to the plaza building and try and fit it into a space that's very constrained, and we're pressing on the plaza building. It's a very formal building that's got a front that demands a certain amount of side width on both sides. We can stay in the original position, and if we do the right things there, we can be ready for the future by new utility lines and other things that might happen to be more refreshed than the old ones that are sitting there. Essentially, we're tied to the city. You are our partners because it's public land and you have to administer or construction manage the project all the way through. You are our bank because we need to funnel all the money through you folks. But right now, we have sufficient money, liquid money. I've failed to follow the price tags that I hear around here because on the public side or private side of life, they just don't exist at that level. It's a small project in terms there's only a few vendors and a few things to accomplish. Does it require all the kind of monies we're talking about here? I don't think so. We have about liquid $160,000 that we can hire the city. We can hire the contractors. you have to hire them, but we can essentially pay for that, not coming out of your today's budget, not worrying about that. And we can take care of all the underground work, and we can be positioned where we should properly be positioned. And then we're talking about something that is really noteworthy. To do something noteworthy, you got to put it in the right spot. And if you want it to be noteworthy, I don't expect you to buy into our design at this point because we're evolving. We stopped when we hit all the headwinds about whether utilities were going to stop us or we had to move to a different location. So we've stopped the design at that point. But the design can be significant, and like other cities invested in to make theirs significant, we have what'd you call it? We have a quest. Beyond that, we have our idea based on the Veterans Memorial is a significant idea that would demand a significant investment. And if you don't have the significant idea, then the investment doesn't follow. So I think we can partner up for this first phase, get that done. We already have half the budget necessary for the second phase. We just can't get at it until we finish that next phase. So we're ready to go out there and fund drive and pick up the rest of the cash so we don't have to come beholding on the city for much of anything except administration and banking. And yes, we would love you to participate in some fashion as an investor. But it's worthwhile to make it great in that one position that's the great position and not mess around with trying to put some constrained animal someplace else. That's my pitch on this whole thing. I hope you can believe in it, even though you haven't seen it yet. You've seen the core idea, which can get smaller and work differently, but it still requires a magic moment that has to be developed. And when that comes along, I think you can put your hearts behind it more than we expect you to do right now. We just want that position on site. We'll pay for it and get you there, and then we'll pick up the rest of the bill if we have to. We haven't started our funding drive yet officially, so give us that opportunity, but give us a site we can work with.
Thank you. Council, so a couple questions on the agenda for us this evening. One is around location and second is around financial impact. Should just open up conversation around location, thoughts?
Well, my thought is I kind of alluded to in asking those earlier questions. It's either one or two in my mind. I don't think it makes sense to go down to the north end of the park, interfere with potential plans down there, and certainly you need to keep it at Lakeside Memorial Park. And I think based on Mr. Finman's presentation, I feel like the ask is a little different than maybe what was in the packet. Felt like the ask was, are we willing to commit $200,000 to make this project happen? And it sounds like it might be less than that. It's more about, hey, can we get going on this? And so I guess, in my opinion, I'd like to see it at preferably 1, 2 as a backup, and, you know, really be exploratory on ways that we can make that work.
Thank you for that. Great perspectives. Other thoughts?
So I would agree with Councilmember Erickson on the location, that is the right location. I'm challenged a little bit on the size just based on having to make this infrastructure change. So the question would be to Ryan and Dave, is there long-term benefits where we'd have to do some, you know, to Mr. Finman's point, make some changes to that line or upgrade it at some point where we're going to be spending this money at some point regardless? Or is this main that's in there good for 30, 40 years? Or any other water improvements or anything, I don't know if there's any stormwater, you know, anything that can be done to make it worth this, you know, big move to make that main move.
Mayor and Council, just to answer that, a question that was, or a comment that was brought out earlier is the beach house. It can't be moved. There's only that one spot of sanitary in that whole entire park, and it has the electricity, the irrigation, and the water all coming into it. So that it's not just pick up the building and move that. So it sounds great, pick up a building and move it, but I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to relocate that beach house. That has nothing to do with this right now, but I'm just saying that that's a financial question later on. As far as the water line, I would recommend if they want that bigger size, that you move it. Because it's probably 80s or 90s that it was put in. The East Broadway probably was 2005, so that connected the old line, but that old one is older. When is it gonna replace? There's a line replaced at Wells Fargo 5 years ago that was stamped 1929. So I can't tell you when it's gonna break, but you just don't want it to break underneath a $500,000 monument that was just put up. I can't predict when that's gonna happen, so. And that's been relayed to, you know, Ron and Mark too, is that we don't want that to happen. We don't want you to build over top of it, and then what happens when there's water coming out of the ground and then we gotta fix it, so.
Yeah.
It could break tomorrow, or it could break in 200 years, and that statue or that memorial could be replaced once time over. But I don't know when that happens, but just planning, you don't wanna build anything over top of a water main if you don't have to. Roads, yes, because you can dig them up, you can patch them back in, but a memorial with pavers and all that, I mean, when you start tearing into it, you're tearing into it. So, that's my recommendation, is if you're gonna do that full size, you have to relocate. Option 2 is you can fit it without causing the city any cost, no sidewalk replacements, no fiber comm removal, anything, maybe off-centered. I mean, that's the option we found that would fit in there. The bigger option is, it's not the water line, but there is fiber and comm in there too that'll have to get moved.
Is that contemplated in this cost, in the?
It is not. The hope is that the comm and fiber provider would move that at their cost. Depends on when they put it in. If it's under 5 years, then usually the city would pay for that. If it's over 5 years, then they would pay for it. That hasn't been explored quite yet because we haven't been down that road of exactly where it's, we don't want to start asking them to move stuff if they don't need to move it yet.
Just another question for either one of you. So when you talk about a second phase, I mean, we're at 550,000. What is the, in totality, what is the cost of this? Or what's the budget, or what do you think? Does it depend on what the fundraising piece is? Dictates the size and how big this gets?
In many ways, we're footprint heavy because we've got this paver idea. That takes a certain amount of territory to do. But that's a low-rise structure. The thing that pushes the envelope is probably this fundamental piece that's in the middle that is intended to be impressive. I would put the budget at something like 550 to 600,000 total, counting all the money we've already got so far. We got 400 so far. We got to go out and hustle up 150 to 200 more $1,000. And I think that would allow us to have the flexibility to go for something that's a big idea, instead of look at what the other cities have done. I mean, you don't want to put up something mediocre, you want to put up something strong. So I'm holding the budget to that degree so that we can get there. We will design back to whatever we can afford and where the budget tells us to go, and we can do that. But right now, the aspirations are there, and the mission is what I was looking for before. The mission's a great one, and the mission wishes to be fulfilled. So we're trying to do our best to get there the right way.
And Councilmember Roberts, if I may add on to that. So the next steps in this process, we have a very preliminary budget, and as Mr. Finneman had stated, $550,000 to $600,000. The next step in this is really fine-tuning that, and prior to doing that, the location is important and necessary to have, determined so that we know the size that we're working with. We can then move forward into next steps with like specific quotes. We've gotten some preliminary estimates, but the next step would be the design to work within that confines of that space. So if it's option 1, then we can continue forward with the design concepts and have more detailed quotes to finalize the budget. Or if it's option 2 and it's scaled down to 40 foot, that's going to change the concept plan for the design element. So we're at this point where we need some of that direction so we can continue with the design of the project, maybe modify it if needed based on the size of the project in the location selected. And then as part of that, it's really determining that final budget. And that's where we're at. And we could certainly, it sounds like tonight council's most favorable to the option 1 or 2. The committee is really in favor of option 1. A next step could be, moving forward with that final budget, if there's kind of that council blessing or support of that location. I think the committee, given location option 1, that obviously that does come with that additional cost. So, I think some of the consensus or feedback from council is, if or what down the road, will there be any support? So whether it's, you heard phase 1 or phase 2. So maybe phase 1 is the relocating the water line, and that's funded through the Veterans Committee up front, or, then later, will there be council support financially for like the construction management? If or what, is there an appetite of council? The grant funding is through 2027 is when it expires, so we're not in an urgent, necessarily the 2025 budget, or a portion for the 2025 budget, or a portion for 2026. So, I think just in general, is there somewhere in this project over the next couple of years, some appetite or support from the city? And if so, what would that look like? And I think we could figure out later on maybe what that amount or contribution from the city could be. I think there's just some feedback of if or would there be council support, if that helps clarify.
One thing to add on to going on what Jamie is saying is, since we do have the grant and then the legacy funds, that money could be used for the upfront money. So in other words, the direct cost for the city could be later on. I mean, other than the full staff that are going to be helping out with the construction, whatever. But other than that, so anyway. Go on.
One of the couple of things. I have a little bit of heartburn over the charge coming from the water fund. I feel like, yes, it's water infrastructure that we're building, but the root cause is not necessarily a need of our water project. Would feel differently if this was rooted in, are we solid that this has to be a water fund funded project, or is there some flexibility there?
Mayor, there is some flexibility there. That was my recommendation, to put in there from the water fund. I put the water fund in there for the sole purpose of water. The water fund pays for water infrastructure. And moving a water, even though it's moving a water line, it is still a new water line, which would there extend the useful life of this main. If this water main needed to be reconstructed next year, that funding would come from the water fund. So that was my logic in proposing the water fund. But yes, the funding can really come from any source that council would want to. It's not restricted to the water fund. It could be the park fund, for example. It could be the general fund, for example. It just, when looking at it from how water infrastructure is funded, that's the purpose of the water fund. Or if you start pulling from those other funds, it now becomes, how are we going to fund for that deficit in those funds for those long-term visions of those funds, where those funds come from.
What I hear in this project is, what's needed is some financial leadership and some financial commitment from the city, that if fundraising efforts don't come through, that we're ultimately going to back the project that's being proposed. And I can appreciate it's very much a chicken and egg conversation between design and cost and what needs to happen. And I appreciate we just need some catalyst to move forward. I just also want to recognize, and I think we need to make the point, that this project financially is, there's a base of support that has been fundraised over many years from the Veterans Memorial Committee and the great work that they've done. Then there was a catalyst that was kind of approved last year in the state legislature through leadership of Representative Detmer and members of the committee and others, to give this grant access that the city is holding on behalf of the committee. Along that same legislative lines, the city was the recipient of a lot of state dollars. We received funding for Eureka Avenue, we received funding for the Southwest area Stormwater project, and there is, if you look at the burden that was eased off of our 10-year plan, we're talking millions and millions of dollars that are now funded by the state. And so it seems a reasonable trade-off to me that we find a way to bridge the gap here on this, if it's $200,000, $250,000. I feel like we should do that because, again, we received so much in those, again, unrelated project dollars, let's be clear, but same funding source coming from the state on, in particular, Eureka Avenue, which would have been a complete city-funded project, but for those dollars. And so, again, I feel like we should be a partner in this project no matter what, but then also just given the amount of grant monies and, state funds that we were provided, we really need to be a good partner here and kind of bridge the gap and provide that stability. Now, I'm still optimistic, either through fundraising or through some design, that we can, if there's an option to avoid the $120,000 to move a water line, I think we'd all be in favor of that. If that is the only option, let's make this project happen. So I'm happy to support it tonight. I feel that we need to kind of take those next steps to be able to get further into the design phase, and if that means what you need from us is some level of financial underwriting, I think we should give that. Also, I would also encourage, continued fundraising, and let's try to make sure this isn't too big of a burden on the water fund or whatever fund is going to have to bridge that gap. But let's be clear, we're sitting in a much better financial position as a city overall because of some state action that we should be able to bridge this, so.
May I?
Please.
Design A in the spot 1 and design B in spot 2 are two different animals totally. So what we really do need to understand is what's our site. We want it to be a specific site, and we're willing to buy down that opportunity as much as we possibly can, so you don't have to think about your budget this year and do much about that at all. You just have to do some sweat equity and help us through this process of bank or an administrator. And it's just not that complicated an idea. And so after that, we still have a good reserve fund sitting there, and we're going to go out and get more funds. So I don't know that we're asking the city for all that much, other than we're hoping to have you participate, to take the load off of the fundraising. But I believe this community can come up with a couple $100,000, absolutely.
And Mayor Bain, I think too, this will be coming back and probably more than once because of the nature of being the partner on public property and the park downtown. So I think for purposes of tonight, the location was the big driving factor of, getting a little more reassurance on that option 1. And I think I appreciate your comments too of, once we continue moving forward with design and fundraising and putting together that final budget, the intent is for the committee to be able to fundraise and continue to seek out grant funding dollars. But if there got to be that point of, bringing it back to council, the full budget, I think that would be an appropriate next step to see the financial part. And
So Mayor and Council, if I could, because I'm the one that asked to bring this to the council after my first meeting with the committee back in January or February. And I'm a little bit lost listening to the conversation because the reason it's here is because we had challenges over location, which you seem to have solved. But then we had challenges over who was paying to move the water main. And Mr. Miller had shared with me that the city committed to him back in 2009 or sometime that they would do that. And there was differences of opinion between committee members and staff. And so I do think there needs to be some level of financial discussion here tonight. If for no other reason, then our next step will be at the next council meeting to bring back a resolution to memorialize whatever direction you give tonight, because it's just gotten lost and confusing over the years, right? So Jamie is right. I'm hearing option 1 seems to be the one that council's supportive of, but I don't want to get wishy-washy on this funding thing, and then we come to a standstill again at the committee level. So even if it's, if the position is tonight we're not willing to contribute to, or at this time we're not willing to contribute to the cost of moving the water main, that we expect that to be funded through the committee. They can always come back later if there's other costs. This has been really challenging for me in just the last couple months here because we can't get a clear, consistent direction on where we're moving to try and get this done. And so that's the background of why it's on here. Even as a week and a half ago, the $200,000 number was what came out of from the committee members. So I'm not sure what happened between then and tonight where they're saying there's nothing. And that's great if they don't think there needs to be that support, or maybe it's just the general engineering, construction documents, construction management stuff that we could at least go on record as saying the city would cover those costs and could come out of the park capital improvement fund or general fund, wherever you so wish it to be. The last thing that I just want to mention, the mayor brings up a great point about all the millions of dollars that we got from the state legislature last year. But remember, your 10-year plan that you approved last year didn't have any of that in there. So any additional funding will increase those numbers. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as where we're at for things. So sorry to make it more complicated, but want to make sure folks understand those couple of things. So really, the location and some level, and again, it can always change in the future, but where is it tonight so that they can get going with the design, and if they've got the money in the bank to be moving the water main and start that process, maybe there's not that contribution tonight. Doesn't mean they can't come back later, or you can give some direction to put $100,000 in the park capital improvement fund, and we can use that for whatever needs might come up or whatnot. But I think it would be really helpful to help staff keep this project moving forward in conjunction with the committee members if we know what the city's role is going to be.
Well said.
Thank you.
So other thoughts on kind of financial commitment or?
Well, I'll just say that I prefer option one. I think it's, the memorial has been there for such a long time, and then I think also that it is a staple within our community, and community members paying forth within that to make that a memorial there. And then the conversation for the new one has been a long time coming as well. And so I think if we are going to have a memorial in this community and redo the memorial, I think we should do it right. And I think just the alignment, the spacing, I think visually option one is preferable in my mind. And then when it comes to the funding for the water main relocation, I'm favorable towards putting money towards that. So.
Well, I guess I'm not sure if it's money will be used for the water mains, it has to come out of the water fund, or it might be on the back end coming out of parks. I think the real ask is what's the number we're willing to commit to? Is it 70? Is it 200? Is it somewhere in the middle?
At this point, I'd be willing to say half, split the difference, whatever that comes to. We've got some skin. This is a city park. It's an amenity to the city. We've got most of the funding from the state, which is taxpayers' money. But I would be comfortable with that. Not saying I wouldn't go higher than that, but I think that would be a commitment where we have some skin in the game here and let them proceed and see how the fundraising works out. But I would be comfortable at this point, at least at half.
When you say half, you mean like 100,000? Like,
well, so if it's 70, I guess we can talk about whether the construction costs or the documents and that, but I guess to make it easy, like half of whatever that in totality, that cost would be to move that water line.
Which is the 130,000 Jamie mentioned in her piece right, Jamie?
That's the current estimate for that water line relocation.
Okay, so then the 70,000 is just the cost to construction for the whole project itself, not just the water lane move, but the whole project.
Yes, as far as the the staff, the engineering, maybe attorney's fees or whatever those other things are, that would be the extra or whatever onto that. But as far as the water main shift, I think that'd be great if the city pays for half of what the cost of that water main is, which is, say it's 130, and so we pay for half out of our funds, whatever, and the city does half. And then, of course, no matter where the location is, the attorneys and the engineering and whatever is all, on city staff-wise, whatever, that's going to be that other cost, whatever that, estimate is.
Are that estimate hard costs or opportunity costs, or what is
So
that?
those would be our hard costs, our third-party costs. Mr. Miller had asked me about staff time and opportunity costs, and given our discussion at the last work session, I got the sense that wasn't important to council to track the opportunity costs. Jamie's time, Dave's time, my time, whose ever time will still be necessary. That wouldn't be part of this number.
So I hear, Councilmember Roberts, just to be clear, do you have some appetite? Do you feel that those project management costs are fully on the city? Is that also part of our investment, or would you also feel that that is half?
I'd be open to that. I don't
Yeah.
have a hard.
I feel that,
Yes.
yeah, I feel that that's an area where, I think it's in our best interest, and it's in everyone's best interest to make sure that that project is managed as well as possible, that it's designed as well as possible. And so I feel like we should at least share in those costs. And if we're starting to run on the high end of, what the committee is able to do, I think the city should take that on, because we know that if a project goes poorly, we end up taking it on anyway. I'd rather us make that upfront and make it a positive project. So I'm open to us also supporting those costs.
So am I hearing 100,000, 150,000? I'm not sure where I'm cutting the halves in. Pick a number and tell me. We can figure out the details of what in the resolution that we bring back.
I was thinking 100, but you guys are talking higher, so.
Yeah, I'm,
Well, if it's 50 of both, that is 100.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, I'd say let's commit to at least that and open to, because we're not upfronting that money necessarily.
And again, if there's issues
something more.
fundraising or project cost overruns, they can always come back and ask for more. I think it would just be helpful in planning for their fundraising campaign and the design to know what the city could contribute.
foundational support. And what I'm hearing is foundational support of at least 100,000. I will say, as we go and as that project gets further designed and as fundraising efforts are coming up, I am open to a second ask. And because again, I just feel like that's part of our role, is to just make sure that this project can happen. And so I'm open to a second ask, but if this is kind of the foundational level that's required to get us to the next level, I think that's the right move for tonight.
Yeah, I agree. I would be open for a second ask. And then too, with that, I think an update would be nice as well. So, update from them for the project and just the conversations being had.
Yeah, and for sure, as Jamie mentioned, and I think she did, this is probably just the first of many times you'll see them before you. Now that they've got some direction, they can start that design and be coming back for that. We'll have to talk about, long-term maintenance and all of those type of agreements. So there'll definitely be updates, I envision, in the future.
Perfect. Gentlemen, does this get us to the next level where we need to go?
Very good. So I hear site one, is it?
We found a home.
Site one, we have a home.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, our next topic this evening, consideration of the downtown stormwater BMPs and kind of an update from our last council discussion. Tim, I think you're leading us through this.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. On March 25th, I presented some options for some potential corrective actions on the downtown BMP project. Number one was to consider, restoring the area to the original design. The second would be to consider easier maintenance. And then finally, to restore all the areas to their pre-construction condition. I was tasked at that time to reconnect with the residents to gauge some interest on a balance, and I'm here to present those this evening. I will run through these relatively quickly, but we can certainly stop at each one and discuss more if you'd like. So for basins 1, 2, and 3, we'll start at the very south end of the project. Those are off of Hayward. The preferred option there was 3, to restore to the pre-construction condition. At Basin 4, unfortunately, I haven't been able to connect with them verbally, so I don't necessarily want to speak for them completely. The unique part about Basin 4 is that it really does match the pre-construction condition the closest. And so for the sake of this exercise, we assumed that basin would remain in place. But again, I don't necessarily want to speak for them as I hadn't connected with them directly. Yes. No, thank you. I saw you walk in and didn't recognize you, so, certainly open to that discussion. Similar to the next basins to the north, the Basin 5 is really split into 3 cells. I know that the Mikolevs were here last time too, discussing or expressing some desire to restore to option 3. Since I hadn't talked to them directly, I don't want to speak for them again. But it's assumed for the sake of this exercise that those basins would be restored to their original pre-construction condition. For the north cell of Basin 5 on Tom Chall and his wife's property, adjacent to his property, we discussed, he expressed some concerns, and desire to restore to option 3, but was open to some additional consideration for a shallow 1/2 foot feature. So we did assume that some volume could be preserved in the north cell of option 5. Moving all the way up to 233rd now to the Searings basin number 6. He also expressed desire to go to option 3 for a full restoration to the pre-construction condition. I asked Mr. Searing if I could present an option to him that essentially kept the same small footprint that was there before and still maintained some water quality volume. He was receptive to that option, but wanted to make sure that his lake access was restored, that his home would be preserved from flooding, that there wouldn't be any real expansion of that storage option. So I sent him a map this morning. I know he's out of town right now, but he was at least receptive to that consideration. Moving finally to basin number 7. We know that basin's quite deep. However, the property owners adjacent to that feature mentioned that the drainage on their property is actually improved. So there's maybe just some regrading that we could do to help encourage some of those flat areas to go away, but really helped keep water from flowing directly into their backyard and stay in the ditch area. So we'd look at some restoration there for better maintenance, easier maintenance, shallower. I know that one is having some trouble draining too. So bringing the sand section up and adding a tile. When all is said and done, that total volume now, on the second page of the memo, would be a total of around 2,800 cubic feet that could be preserved. That has an offset treatment area of around 1/2 an acre, 0.46 acres. I have not updated a cost estimate. I presume that $92,000 number would go down because we're not filling in every feature. But certainly want to open this back up for discussion if need be, and answer any additional questions.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for the additional work and the feedback that we took from our last council meeting. I know we have a number of homeowners here, and I'm happy to open up for additional public comment if there are comments that you would like to make as council's considering this option. And again, we're just in workshop discussion tonight. Anything that we talk about would have to come back in a meeting anyway, but I am happy to take some public comment if there is anybody that would like to speak. And if you could start with your name and address, just for the record.
My name is Tom Chell, 7480 North Shore Trail. And my biggest concern, and I think Blake got the deepest hole, but the thing is becoming a nice garbage pit for people to throw their beer cans in, because they don't want to be drinking and driving with a beer can, so they get out the window as soon as they can. And so my biggest concern, mine is really deep. It's 1.5 feet, 2 feet deeper than even the plant. And I've talked with Tim. I said if we could have a gradual, maybe drop a foot from the 917 foot sea level where the thing started. 917 was from where it started, and it was supposed to drop down 3 feet. Well, mine drops down to 911, from 917 to 911 is where it drops down. Okay, and so my biggest concern is maintainable. And I said last time that the leaves, the wind from the northwest, west, southwest, blow all the leaves into this thing, and it's turning into a pus hole. And it's too deep for me to run a mower in. I've always maintained it real nice, but now it's just a leaf pit. And so my absolute desire is to have it just a slight, where it could still accomplish the same thing. To the right of my mailbox, there's a slight divot, and the water stays there for a while, and then it soaks in. I mean, this thing is just way too deep. And so I would be open, I understand that a lot of money's been spent. And I don't want to be unreasonable, but this could be done to a slight drop, and it could accomplish the same thing. I know they got the drain tile in, and they could raise it up and put another drain tile in with the sand, soak it in, and, but the biggest thing right now is it's unmaintainable. It's too steep to even, I don't want to walk down there and be picking up the beer cans and the trash that goes in there. I'm not going to go down and pick up the leaves and pile in there. And it has to be maintainable so you could mow it with a mower and pick up the leaves. It would look nice and still have there's a wide path we're talking there.
Right.
And so that's my comments. I know that there's, we want to try to preserve what has been done, but it has to be a lot, it's too deep. It's too deep, it's too deep. And I think the same thing could be accomplished with a slight drop, come up, and it would accomplish, I think, quite a bit. Because I know the amount of water that goes there. I stood out there in the pouring rain. I know how much water goes. And if you put that by the telephone pole there, if mine goes into the one south of me, Joe and Aaron's place, there's a rise. The water could accumulate there and then soak in, and it would work fine. So
Fair.
anyway, that's my comments.
Fair.
So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to speak on this topic?
Hello, I'm Stephen Drake, 7496 North Shore Trail.
Good evening.
So now we also have we just recently moved in end of September. When we looking at the house, printing the house, this was all supposed to be done beforehand. And so we moved in, we first looked at the house, there's a nice little ditch there. And now we have a 4-foot hole for a pond in our front yard. It's also affecting our drainage in our front yard, because when they did it, it slopes up, and so now our yard can't drain out because it's all blocked by the pond that they created in the front. Same thing, we're also finding beer cans. Also, there's a concern right around the corner there, people are going way too fast. We've already had one vehicle go off the road into it, so it's just a huge safety concern for that. Our neighborhood has kids. We're concerned about kids falling in there, pets, just making it safe. And also, same thing, we're having garbage dumped in there and it's starting to smell like a swamp. And it's not very livable. We don't want to sit on our front yard or down by the lake and smell a swamp. Have to worry about that. So, yeah, we'd like it to be filled in.
Thank you. Please.
I am Joe McLiff at 7490 North Shore Trail. I want to say basically, I think these things, right now they're basically ditches. I don't know if you guys have been around that North Shore Trail area, but Steve brought up a good point. It's like there's that curve, people go around it. I've seen cars run off. I walk on one side of the road because I figure I'm less likely to be hit because that curve. That's where I used to work. One of my co-employees said, oh, when 97 is busy, we take your road because it's a county road and it's well-built and it's fast. So we have a lot of traffic through there. In our 20 years there, we've also seen people start to try to ride bikes there, which is kind of a harrowing experience. We've also had people start walking their dogs. It is always a difficult thing with that curve, now it's made even more difficult by the big ditches. And it seems to me that's not a great way to maintain an appeal of the city, the neighborhood especially. The other thing with this is that, my wife alluded to the fact that we had made a rain garden down in our place. That was born of the fact that when we first moved in there, every spring, that whole area, half of our land by the lake would get flooded. And so we had somebody come in, we had these prairie restoration people came in. They looked at it, they said, oh, you know, you could filter the water and have a beautiful rain garden down here. And I can't remember what it cost, but it didn't cost $92,000. So they went down there, they did it, and they were right. It's beautiful, you should see it. You know, I've seen other people do the same thing around the lake. It seems to me that that would be a better way to do the filtering and plus save that space so that people could use it. You know, I think it would be a great way to develop the neighborhood too. And eventually, somewhere down the line before I die, I'd like to see a bike path there.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak?
Erin McAuliffe, 7490 North Shore Trail. I just would like a point of clarification. What were you saying as far as each plot? What is the proposal tonight? I don't know. Were you guys proposed something to vote on tonight?
Nothing to vote on.
Okay, so you're just giving the, like, report of what everybody wanted. So can you run through that one more time for me, just really quickly? Does everybody want it restored to the same, apart from, I don't know what direction it is closest to?
North up there.
Okay, just
Yeah.
everybody wants it restored except that one spot.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
I was tasked with just coming back to have that conversation.
Okay,
Yep.
got it. Very good. That's all. That was my only question.
Thank you. Council feedback for Tim, I don't know if you have any additional comments you'd like to make?
No.
Council feedback, and again, requested feedback is on suggested next steps. Is that what we are, our mission for this evening?
Yes, we need direction so that we can come back with the quotes next time and what work you would like to have done.
This project is challenging for many, many reasons, but if we could reverse time and do things differently, there are many things I think we would all agree that we would do. Unfortunately, that's not where we are. I can't foresee I can't feel good about an option other than reversing back with maybe some of the slight modifications that have been proposed. There's too much that has already happened, and I feel like, as a project overall, we've lost trust, and I feel like we owe it to these homeowners to make this right, and I think, what's proposed in front of us tonight is much closer to that, considering that we don't have a time machine to jump back and, do project communication differently, and there's all sorts of design things that, we would have potentially have done differently had we had this information 9 months ago or a year ago when we made this decision. So I've been looking for, as we've had these conversations, I've been looking for a different option that, is the next best idea, and I don't feel good about anything else. Other thoughts?
I agree. I think from the last conversation a couple weeks ago, and then based on tonight, and just the bullet points on homeowners' thoughts from that night, but then also coming back to it, it just seems like option 3, restoring the area to its pre-construction condition, seems to be favorable amongst a majority of the homeowners, and I think it's only fair to the homeowners to go back to that.
Councilmember Roberts?
But is that what you're saying as well, to go back to 3 on everything, or just, or what is presented on some of the residents that are agreeable to?
I mean, if there is some level of salvageable project that, and in some instances, I heard that it's better, right? So this project results in better drainage, and there is some salvageable project, yes, I think we should. But if we don't have agreement, I think that option by default for that particular, let me just step back. I'm open to an option property by property, and so and I like the way Tim has laid this out, that if there are some properties where a salvageable project is the next best step, then I think we should do that. But if we don't have that agreement, then I think we should revert back on those individual projects.
And I should clarify, I agree.
Is that an option? Maybe I'm trying to create options that don't exist here.
Yeah, basins 6 and 7 really on the north end near 233rd are independent of the other parts of the project. So, with the exception of basin 6, if we were to leave basin 7, that's still about 1,000 cubic feet of storage that we could achieve there. It's largely, away from the front portion of that yard, and, those homeowners have expressed that the drainage has gotten better. So that would be a good option to leave there. Again, it's an independent drainage area too, so it's not right in the middle of anything else, or, wouldn't impact anything else upstream. Regarding the Searings property, that has been presented to them, but again, if the decision here is to revert back to the pre-construction condition, would certainly support that option, or basin 7 would probably be the only exception.
And I would say also, if there's opportunities to connect with the Searings between now and when we have to make that decision, let's certainly keep those options open, would be
I intend to.
Be my preference. We just have to say this at some point, right? So the parcels that we're talking about in the impacted land was right of way. And to me, this project, it looks very different if it's not right of way. And I appreciate that if you live there, it feels like your property. But I do think we just need to put that out there, that this was right of way, and that, doesn't mean that this project should not have gone many times different. It doesn't excuse the result of what happened. But when this project was contemplated, one of the reasons to do this project was, again, to get stormwater management in areas where we already have public land. And that is, by definition, what we have, and part of the reason why we went down this path. Now, again, we don't need to stay with that, and I'm happy to reverse course, and I think that's the right thing to do. But this is right of way, and so whether we're talking a street project, or we're talking a trail, or we're talking about stormwater management, it is why right of way exists. But again, I think the right thing to do in this instance is to revert back as much as we need to get property owner agreement. Anything else?
That my desire is to try to get as much out of this as possible, and I appreciate the property owners, adjacent property owners, that are willing to work with the city on this. I mean, that's very big of them to be able to see the long-term plan here, and for them to be open enough to do that. I really appreciate that, and if we can move forward with a way to make everyone happy, get some credits for this, I think it's a win-win at this point.
I agree. A little win and maybe not as big of a loss.
Well, if I may, then my next steps would be to confirm with the Searings on their desire there. I can re-engage with the property owners near Basin 7 as well, and have those conversations in the field. But I'd like to, move forward with an updated cost estimate and bring that design back.
Right. Just one other thing, just to put on the public record, because I think it's important. The contractor that did this work, we no longer have a relationship with. That will not be the contractor that does the work going forward. So know that is also an important part of this project. And there's some lessons to be learned on our part of, selecting who's leading those projects and selecting how those projects are being executed. So just know that when we talk about another phase of this project, it will be a different project team, so, well, different contractor that's doing the work, so. Anything else? Anything else you need from us tonight?
No.
All right. Property owners, anything else you'd like council to hear?
Tell me what the next step would be from your part?
The next action council will take, if I believe what's going to happen next is that we will approve a project specifically for the next phase, which will be either a fix, if there is a fix that can be had, or full restoration back to the original state. And so that would be the next action council will have. In the meantime, Tim and the project team will be working to kind of put together those plans.
How about a timeline for this? To start working, or is it gonna be ripped up all year like it was last year?
No. Yeah, we would bring plans and specifications back to council for approval. And anybody can correct me if I'm wrong here. We would then develop that quote package and solicit quotes. We'd come back to council for approval of a contractor, and then we could initiate construction after that. So if we follow that 2-week council cycle, ideally we'd have plans and specs back to you in 2 weeks, kind of similar to how I presented it last time. We could solicit quotes in those next 2 weeks, get approval for a contractor, and then proceed from there. We'll work with the contractor on construction timelines and so on after that, which we can keep you all posted.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for where we've landed on this challenging project. So, Tim, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
And all of you, thanks for being here as well. Move on to our next topic, which is 8D, which is consideration of the Hidden Creek Engineering Standards Waiver Request. And Abby, I think you're walking us through this.
Yes, Mayor Bain, members of the council. In 22, the city approved preliminary final plats for Hidden Creek, a 57-acre multi-phase development that's going to contain 125 single-family homes when done. The first phase of the development plan contains 22 lots and is nearing completion. Hidden Creek is going to move forward with their second phase final plat. In fact, I just got some documents tonight, handed fresh off the press, I think. But they are asking for one request in the second phase, and that is for a waiver from our 2023 engineering standards. Specifically, the standards indicate that after the design of preliminary plat utility grading plans, that they would submit to us electronic copies for inclusion into the city's CAD system. And then the engineer would use those plans as a base for developing final plans and specifications for public utilities and street improvements on the site. This is slightly different than what the city was doing with our engineering standards in 2017, where we would review those final plans. So the development team would actually review all final plans and specifications, give them to us, our engineer would review them. My understanding is that change kind of occurred to help reduce some of that multiple back and forth that can happen during review processes. Whereas if plans were given to us and we develop the plans and specifications, we know we're only doing it once and then it's done. So the developer tonight has said, hey, city, we've been kind of through this. Our plans are almost done. Can we just finalize those plans and specifications and have your engineer review them? So that's the question that's before you this evening. In my staff analysis, I do note there isn't a big risk to the city. Obviously, we might need to do probably an amended development agreement to memorialize this. But as long as we have something in writing that both parties agree that we still have the review authority of the plans and that no construction activity will occur until final plans are approved, I think that it still satisfies the general intent of our development review process. I know Paul Bergerman and John Dobbs, representing Hidden Creek, are here tonight to discuss this with you. Do you have any questions for me or for them?
Any questions? And gentlemen, I'm happy to provide you an opportunity to speak as well. If you have, do you have anything you'd like council to consider as we consider this topic?
My name is John Dobbs, and I kind of run the Hidden Creek project. At the hope of keeping it at the 10,000-foot level and doing this kind of briefly, I would just simply add that the majority of the metropolitan areas in the Twin Cities do, in fact, let developers do their own plans reviewed by the city. This situation in Forest Lake is abnormal, at least from my experience. The second thing, and I think you guys just watched this happen with the Stormwater project, discussed the idea of putting things out for competitive bid, being able to control the contractors and the work that you're going to spend money to do. We don't have that luxury when we're forced to hire the city engineer to do the final plans. Engineering is not black and white. I know that for a fact. This project was pretty complex, not the most complex one I've ever done, but pretty complex, and as the council knows, this was a source of disagreement in '22 between the staff and us, and everybody had opinions, so part of it is the site itself, but we don't have an advocate for our designs going forward because we are unable to have our own engineer do the work. Engineering and the city engineers gets to have their say and obviously represents the city, and we're not advocating putting in a project on duct tape. But the fight that, the concerns that came up in '22, the engineer that we had hired is also the city engineer for other municipalities in the state, multiple ones for that matter. The best example I can give you in my personal experience is that I was doing a project in Milwaukee where we were pulling fly ash out of the ground that was a hazardous material, and yet in Kansas City where we were doing a project, the city engineer would not let you build the streets without fly ash. So there is a variety of ways to do projects, and a lot of them work. And all we're asking is to be able to control our own destiny and have our own engineer bid the work. And lastly, and I think there are numerous people in this room that have been told this, the previous city administrator, given the challenges we had in '22, directly told us that we would be able to try this and see how it went, and be a test case is the words he used. He was not ambiguous about it. He was very direct. This was very difficult in '22. It's not a reflection of Bolton and Mink. It's certainly not a reflection of Ryan or Jeremy. They do good work, but the process is very complex. The other thing that ends up happening is by the time we see invoices for the work that we're required to hire and we're required to pay for, the city's already paid for them. And even if we have a problem, and I can show you examples where we do, by the time we see it, Kevin and I are having awkward conversations about bills that have already been paid, and because of the system, we can't have our own advocate and go, well, wait a minute. You bid this, you told us this, now you're giving us a bill for it? No, that isn't the way it works. But by the time we see it, it's over. And as I said, majority of the metropolitan cities don't have a system where the city engineer does their own plans and the developer doesn't have any say in it. There are multiple people in this room who come from other cities, some of which I've worked in. That is not the way it's done in a lot of places. So that's a high level. I can go down the rabbit hole as far as you want. I have
Fair.
paperwork.
Fair. Thank you.
But it would, the project itself, it's really going very well. For those of you that haven't been out there, there are multiple houses going up, sales are happening, things are happening. The project needs to keep moving forward. So we would very much like to get the council's direction on this. And I'm already behind schedule. So that's on me, but here I stand. I didn't know that we weren't going to take action. I heard it was my mistake, but I didn't know there was going to be action into the discussion. But boy, we sure would like some direction.
Thank you. Council, questions that you may have as we're...
Yeah, maybe the first one is, remind me, when did we adopt these 2023 engineering standards? Where does that come from?
Ryan, would you mind answering the question?
Mayor, City Council, each year we bring engineering standards to you guys for review and approval. Recently, obviously, just a lot of the changes are to do with MnDOT's construction standard materials, naming convention, specifications like that, or some material or item that's been used on a public project that either worked well or didn't work well, and working with Public Works is when those are adopted annually.
Ryan,
So
can you... Oh, go ahead.
I don't know what year it was changed, right? But yeah, so the current process that we're doing right now has worked very well with other projects. The development right before this, Forest Hills Preserve, went very smooth and easy. Just like before 2017, 20 plus years of projects were done, the same process that's approved right now. There are a handful of metro communities that do this process. Not exactly the city engineer, but the city engineer hires a consultant, other firms to do it on behalf of the city and not a private. But yes, there are several communities too that allow private all the way. We've said from the get-go, we would support you guys any which way you wanted to go. So previously, back when all the township and the city was being developed, it was the process that's being implemented right now. You had some people that wanted to change it in 17, and they allowed them to change it. 17, 18, 19, the amount of items that came up, you guys changed it back on your own.
Was that and that was the time frame, I think, so early on my time on council, I think we became aware that, so I think the change had happened prior to me being on council. But there was a number of projects that had a number of situations that prompted, I think, a change in policy. Projects in particular that come to mind were Second Avenue, as well as, I think there were some issues with Chestnut Creek. Am I thinking about are we talking about the same
And Third
policy?
Lake Estates.
And
It was those three projects.
what was the other one?
Third Lake Estates.
Third Lake Estates, and we're talking about the same process, right?
No, those three were on the process that's being proposed to you tonight.
Correct.
So you guys did experiment with it again, and you decided to go back to your process that you had previously. But again, we said we would support which way you want to go. We are not deviating from any city standards or specifications or creating new designs and adding cost to projects. We're basically allowing the projects to be maximized up front with the plats and the dirt work. And then once the line work is all laid in, we take that line work to finish the final construction documents to the city standards, to allow consistent infrastructure design, plans that fully meet city standards and specifications. We have a better understanding of what public works preferences are, so there's that less back and forth, not duplicating efforts. And spending our time on preparing final plans and specs instead of review memos and letters. Again, we'll support which way the city wants to go, but we've even handed example plan sets to those projects that we just talked about, and we gotta do what we gotta do to put comments on those plans, and yeah, those were some 200+ comments on some of those big reviews. We're talking 200 lot developments too. But at the end of the day, we have to do what's best for the city, because we're not looking at it as one project. And if we just need to be the reviewer, so be it. But we're gonna look out for the best interests of the city for the long-term investment that the city's gonna be owning and maintaining this infrastructure. And it's not gonna go over and beyond city standards or specifications. This project has been very unique, one of my most unique development projects in my career. I've done development in Maple Grove, Apple Valley, Woodbury, Chaska, Centerville, and Forest Lake, Chisago City. So I've been all over the metro myself too. This project has had a lot of changes. We've changed phasing. We start something, have finished it, and then been asked to do something differently. We've been asked to reduce the street widths, and there's a lot of work that goes into all that line work whenever you're adjusting the curb heights, the rim inverts of the storm sewer that are in those curb lines, and then making everything try to match. And right now we're chasing all over the place the grading permits that are coming in, because there's a variation of grading stuff out there too, to try to make it the best project for who's gonna live there long term. Right now we're fighting some driveways that are being proposed at 10%. Yeah, does that meet city standard? But do you think a 10% driveway you can get up in the wintertime? No. So, those are the things we're trying to balance. But on the backside, our invoices are submitted monthly. I can go faster if you want, but we submit our invoices monthly. So if there's discussion at that time, we're more than open and have dealt with it more on this development than I have all my other invoices. So at the end of the day, we're just looking out for the best interest of the city, and we're willing to support whatever you guys feel is best moving forward.
Question, thoughts, feedback?
I appreciate the broader feedback. Thank you.
So
if there's a case, if it is a real case where bills are being paid before, I mean, is there way to slow that piece down so that the developers have an opportunity to look at those before they're paid? I mean, if that's a concern, it seems like that could be maybe a simple timing thing or something, but.
Point of clarification, Your Honor, Counsel?
Please.
The question before you, I'm concerned that it hasn't been presented in a way that you fully understand what you're being asked. So if I may, the question really is the city, the way that the design standards are set right now is that every developer that comes here has to use Bolton and Mink for all of their designs, for their engineering. They don't have the ability to use an outside engineer for virtually anything.
For the design of public infrastructure, right?
Correct. Only public infrastructure. They are designing, or taking everything up to the preliminary plats, and we take it through the final plat.
You look like you may have a
Yes,
for
but
or a-
fundamentally, that's sort of a, sort of. Yes, sort of. But practically speaking, that's not, I mean, so practically speaking, Bolton and Mink gets all engineering work related to development. That doesn't mean that there isn't concept plans that they're doing before they come to the city. That doesn't mean that there isn't some, sort of pre-work work. But when we're talking about the actual projects, it's Bolton and Mink that does all of the engineering. What Hidden Creek is asking for the council to consider is to be able to use their own engineer to do those engineering plans. My previous experience is from the developing world. And I can tell you that it is unusual for a city to have the city engineer be doing the plans. There is some concern around not allowing a developer to, bring in their engineer to do those plans. Historically, what the city's perspective had been was there was some mistakes made by previous engineering firms, and so it was a quality control mechanism, and that was why it was brought back in-house. But there is some legality around the issue. That is why the previous city administrator, when he met with Hidden Creek, said, yes, there was some timing issues with being able to change anything in the process for phase 1 with Hidden Creek, but for phase 2, that would need to be readdressed because there was some legal concerns about requiring a developer to use the city engineer. It's a little bit different if you're talking about a consultant, but when there's some convolution there at a minimum. This was something that was brought to our attention, to the city attorney attention back in 2022, and it was on our advice to the previous city administrator that this probably needed to be reevaluated as a process in the future. So I just want to make sure that we're clear about what the ask is tonight, and what we're talking about.
So one of the reasons to revert back to this policy was there were a number of projects that went poorly. And I understand, so there is a requirement for city review of the plans. And as I understand it, that there gets to be there's a time in a project on the execution where we found ourselves experiencing public-facing delay. Part of this was because it was a redevelopment project, not just a delay of new construction, but there was public-facing delay that was causing a fair amount of impact to the community. And so one of the concerns is that we lacked the ability to correct for that or prevent that from happening. And I guess under this different model, I think my question is, what forms of enforcement do we have, or what mechanisms do we have when something goes poorly to be able to recover? In absence of us putting in, we essentially put in the preventative control that just prevents that from happening. So what are our enforcement mechanisms, or what are the tools that we have when something goes poorly to be able to fall back on?
Your Honor, Counsel, primarily, you would probably be using the development agreement. In the development agreement, it would depend on what the situation is, but in the development agreement, the developer agrees to a whole litany of items, from making sure that the streets are swept in a timely manner, to making sure that the grading is correct, to making sure that the plans are built to the plan specifications, you know, to complying with a whole bunch of different inspections. I mean, just truly, there isn't a grain of sand that isn't accounted for in the development agreement. And so if they are in violation of the development agreement, then the mechanism is to pull the letter of credit, or it's a cash escrow, depending upon, you know, basically the amount that we're talking about. And then the city would use that letter of credit funds to fix the problem. Typically, at the point where we would be telling a developer, we're going to pull your letter of credit, they're going to get their street sweeper out there, they're going to get whatever they need to correct, they're going to correct that. Secondarily, you can withhold building permits, depending upon, again, it really depends on what the thing is that's not being done correctly. But that would be another element, is to withhold a building permit. Or alternatively, if they've already had a building permit, then you would withhold the CO, so the certificate of occupancy would not be released until the corrections were made. Those would be your like bigger tools. Frankly, with these administrative citations that you just passed, for some of the smaller stuff, we could also start issuing administrative citations if it's just sort of a minor thing, but we really want to send a message that, you know, clean up your street, sweep your street, really would probably be where it'd be most appropriate. But that would be another mechanism as well.
If I might.
Please.
So the process would, as I believe it goes in most places, our engineer puts together a set of plans, Bolton and Mink would review them if they continue to be your city engineer. Therefore, we're all on the same page about what we're building. Bolton and Mink inspects the work by a contractor. They sign off on it, they sign off on the pay stubs, or they just sign off on the work in general. We paid someone $40,000 to set out the project and pay Bolton and Mink to do review that the work was going in the right way. At the end of the day, I'm not sure what's really different in what we're proposing versus what happened last time, because they're still got oversight. I wasn't around for 2017. I don't know if Bolton and Mink was around for 2017. But the process we're talking about, city still has complete control of what goes on, besides what Amanda was talking about related to the developers of credit. But just putting it into the ground, they're involved from beginning to end. But what we don't have is we don't have somebody on our end who can say, and just so, for example, the preliminary plat process we went through in 2022, the senior engineer signed the plans when he was done with them. That's how thorough he thought the review was. This is a city engineer for multiple municipalities in the northern metro. He thought that the plans were so done that he actually signed them as an engineer. And yet, since that date, we've spent $200,000 and change in engineering, reviewing and reviewing and reviewing. This system is difficult to deal with, and yeah, at the end of the day, it's a cost thing, but it's also a control thing. And, you know, so I just don't see how the city has any risk, as was discussed in the opening credit. The plans we have to be approved. They're done by the city standards, which are already in place. The work is inspected by the city engineer. We have to pay for that and make sure it's all done the right way. When it's all done the right way, the COs, occupancy permits, are issued by the city after feedback from the staff, so they review everything up till then. There's cities like Woodbury, cities like Inver Grove Heights, cities like all of the metropolitan areas around that do it that way. They're doing fine. I don't know what happened in 2017, and Ryan has said some of that to me as well, and I believe you. But we're not that. And, you know, at the end of the day, you know, this project, land and houses, $120, $150 million worth of infrastructure by the time it's done, and the land that we own and we've already had preliminary plat. We're not the only for-profit person in this conversation. Bolton and Mink, my understanding. Sandtech, for that matter. Doesn't really matter who the engineering firm is. They all run a business as well. So to be direct, I'm not sure why we don't get afforded the same luxury. You guys run a business, you bid everything. If I come to you and say my parkland's worth $500,000 an acre, just because I say so, what do you think? Can I get that? I can't, you know? And I just don't think that's right, that we should have to do that either. You know, we put in a good project, and Bolton and Mink has done a good job getting us there, and I'm grateful, but it has been very difficult to do. It has burned out multiple people in the process. Doesn't have to be this way. And we're here for the long haul, and the ownership has put an awful lot of their money into this. They aren't gonna see any of their money back for quite some time. They are really invested. So, just like you guys, they live here as much as you do.
Mrs. Bergman?
I just want to make one comment, I guess a few comments. I think most of you are familiar with Summerfields that we did, which is a great community. But Ryan keeps bringing up the best interests of the city. Come on, we want the best interest for the city too, right? I mean, we're part of the same team on this. City standards, our engineers know how to design things. The redundancy and the cost was if it wasn't frustrating, it was hilarious because you couldn't imagine what we were going through, and it doesn't need to be that way. So I know we can do a great job with our engineers. Everybody here still gets to review it and take a look at it, and Bolton Mink watches us put it in the ground. There's no reason not to allow us to do it. Our engineers are fantastic, and you'll have a great project when we're done. By the way, this is only the first phase of the 125 lots. With the land that we have under control right now, we have about 300 lots, and hopefully, if we can all work together, we can expand that. And all that's gonna do is bring more residents and more households and rooftops to the community of Forest Lake. Unless you don't want that, then you gotta tell us that now. If we wanna stop developing, if we wanna be like Lake Elmo was for many years, then we need to know that. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. So here's what makes this so challenging is a number of topics, but tonight's apparently the night for challenging topics. Is so much of the detail and the execution is at the staff level. And so as I hear about what those enforcement actions are, there is a detection that's needed, there's layers of communication, there's enforcement that's needed, there's staff action that's required. And what's challenging about making this decision is that we are doing it with many different people and many different roles than when we had this conversation back in 2017. We are, and I kind of see the city administrator position as kind of the kind of a key role in certainly, guidance to the building department, guidance to the development department, kind of key role in being kind of the access and kind of the coordination with the attorneys from an enforcement action, certainly management of the contract with our city engineer. I am nervous to make this decision because I was part of the vote to make it the way that we have it today. So I'm nervous to make this decision without having that just perspective and long-term guidance of a city administrator, because again, I think that is a critical role to whatever, there's different models out there, but the model, the person that is going to help make that successful, I just think the city administrator just plays a really critical role in that. So, what I'm interested in is, can we make only the decision that's needed for the question on the table? Can we make a situational, short-term decision rather than just changing a policy that opens it up for everybody? If we are going to change, for all of the reasons and concerns that Ryan has and all of the mechanisms that Amanda has, that all requires a level of coordination you don't want from up here. You want from, strong leadership in that city administrator role for it to be successful. So I appreciate you have a timeline to your project that is independent of what we are doing here from a city staffing perspective. I just feel like the execution of whatever decision we are going to make is just absolutely critical, and it's challenging to do it when we are sitting here with an interim city administrator. With all respect to your skill set, it's just not yet a permanent position. And so what is going to be the right long-term answer for us? Goodness, if we could have some additional conversation, some, additional understanding the pros and cons and digging a little deeper, I think that's what we need to do, but also we owe these gentlemen an answer, and so that's where I'm really struggling on. Does this need to be a forever policy decision tonight, or is there a next best action that we can take that provides some initial guidance? I don't know.
Mayor Bain, if I might add, I wouldn't be coming to you tonight with a policy change for a long-term circumstance. I was in conversations with former administration who did support this as a pilot for this next phase.
So that's an important distinction. So this would be a suggestion for just what you said, a pilot for one project.
And not even for one project, for this next phase. If it works well, let's talk about the next one. I think that in order to make this as a long-term policy change, I think the council and the development community is going to need to, and staff are need to be able to see that we can efficiently do it differently than we're doing it now, comfortably than we are doing it now. All that Hidden Creek is asking you for tonight is the final construction plans on phase 2 of Hidden Creek.
I'd be comfortable with that. I mean, reading, the analysis, I mean, there's really little risk to us. The extra costs are to the developer if they don't get it right. So I'd say, let's make this change for this phase and reevaluate it.
It's just this, not a long term, I would be comfortable with that as well. The onus ends up on them. I mean, they have to come back with the specs that the city demand, and our engineer can tell them, mark up that 200 comments or whatever it is, and it might end up costing them more. It's kind of a gamble on that. But I think the free market, open market to let an engineer come in, and that's, I'm a free market person, so I like that idea, as long as, again, the city engineer has the final say.
I'm actually not a huge fan of approving a waiver from our standards that we already approved probably like a couple months ago. Only because I'm worried that it would open up a door to other developers coming in. And I'd be nervous about that, because then at that point, why wouldn't we just look at amending the policy as a whole, which that would lead to a longer conversation. And then it gets to your point.
Yeah. I share that same concern, and, for the next developer that walks in, I think we, if we're open to do it for one, I think we have to be obligated to, I'm concerned we're opening the floodgates, right, of the concern. I think this needs some bigger, larger conversation from a policy standpoint, and deserves a larger conversation from a policy standpoint. But we also need to be, from a staffing perspective, ready to enforce whatever that direction would be. That said, I have, the city has been very well served by Bolton and Mink and Ryan's work in particular, and so I'm always hesitant to deviate from that, but, I think what's different here, to your point, is that we're sitting in a different place from a staffing perspective. And I think that is a critical component to this, because to me, this is yes, there's a council policy decision to be made, but clearly councils from across the metro have made different decisions. Because there's supporting each one of those decisions is a management structure and a philosophy, and how, team members are working together. And we aren't quite in that position. And so to me, this feels like an interim ask, and the time for us to grant an interim ask. I'm open to it. I have reservations overall, but I'm open to us considering it as kind of just this interim ask and the circumstance on just where we are right now with overall staffing.
Again, just so we're clear, we have preliminary plat on the 65 lots, 22 which we've done. So all we're asking is to have our engineer do the plans on the last 43 of those 65 lots. We can reevaluate, we can relook if something screws up. They still have the final say and look. And we're looking out for the city's best interests as well as ours.
So if things were to go poorly and you were to have a delay, what are who's impacted by that? Is adjoining property owners impacted? I'm just trying to
We own.
measure the downside risk.
This is an island that we own. There isn't any adjacent owners other than the lot, or the homes that are currently being built right now. But it's not that complicated. I mean, it's not like we're starting from like 2 years ago.
Right.
This has already been
Vetted.
through and gone through, and it's not a huge ask. And our engineer is, here's the other thing. Have Bolton Mink be a bidder on it and be competitive. We're open to that too. But to have this unbelievable open checkbook and decide in doing things, everything can be redesigned. I don't know what any of you guys do for a career, but things can be done in different processes or procedures and be done and finished and still be a great project. So I've done this my whole life. I've never had this situation. And if you go check my reputation around, I mean, I don't have any cities that have had bad experiences with us. And if there is a problem, you have a huge letter of credit.
And all we were asking, and what I said at the beginning, and I might not have been clear, was this was vetted by the last city administrator. And I was told we could be a test case. And that's how the words I used at the beginning. I understand the system doesn't change quickly, but that's what we're looking for. And it's this has been vetted by not only Bolton and Mink, detailed, but Widset, detailed, also Rice Creek Watershed, detailed, hardcore detailed. And this thing's been through the ringer a lot. But the cost that we've spent so far just to put 22 lots in the ground for engineering is insane. There's just no other word for it. And if we really are trying to do something that's affordable, which is how you and I first met, was upstairs doing that, and we really are trying to do good quality projects and put them in the ground, well, who's done more than Bergman has in this city? And I've done a lot of this in a lot of places all over the country, and it's a good project, so we're not trying to duct tape it together. I think we can show you that this works. I think we can show you it works really well. I don't know what happened in 2017, but I'll tell you this, it isn't going to be us. I've watched engineers come up with creative ways to try to keep the streets from sinking and curbs from being stable and cities never having to pay anything again. It never works. We live in a place where the ground freezes 8 feet deep. There's no way around it. And you come up with all kinds. I've watched this go on forever. They're very good at what they do. So are other people. I watched Bonastro before them, SEH after them. It just goes on. They're for profit, we're for profit, you guys have fiduciary, we're just trying to do a project, but we want to have some control over it. We can't. The way the system is set up now, we don't have control. We lose control of the process, and yet it's our money.
Yeah.
So I should clarify, my issue isn't that all the multitudes of wrongs that could potentially happen with any sort of project anywhere. My issue is that we are waiving our 2023 engineering standards for one developer, and what's not to stop another developer 2 weeks from now to come in and ask for the same thing, 3 that day. A couple weeks later, we have another 5 that day, and then it just continues down the path of, well, let's just wait. Well, okay, you guys did it once before. Why not do it for us? So that's my issue. So then if that is the plan for even just this one, internally for staff, are we planning on having further conversations about this policy? Because in my mind, if the answer is no, we're not going to have more internal conversations about this policy. We're just wanting to ease the burden for these one developers. My answer would be no. I would rather follow the policy just like every other developer in the city has to. So I think if we're not having a further conversation about this paragraph within our engineering standards,
Well, I think we should.
Yes.
Not tonight, but I think ultimately we should, because we do want the developers to come. We know they're gonna come.
Right.
And we want to be a good partner to them.
Yeah,
or
so,
with
so
them.
I just think, yeah, if we are, I'd be fine to say yes to this if we are gonna have a further conversation about this.
We would love that.
I would be in absolute no to this waiver if we think we are not talking about this policy ever again.
We absolutely
Because I'm not gonna do handouts to one developer and then be surprised if another developer comes in and be like, well, you did it for them, do it for me. Okay, well then why won't we just do it for everyone else? So I'd rather us.
Make sure it works, though.
Yes, yeah, and so if we, and if we're gonna call it a pilot, I guess, then we can do that. But I think it'd make me feel more comfortable going from the standards if it's going to be a bigger conversation for a specific goal and not just for specific developers.
Mayor Bain, can I just chime in really quick? This is something, so as a reminder, in 2017, you didn't have a development director. You had a single zoning administrator and your city administrator that was working with engineering and public works and legal. And you do have more staff here that are looking at these processes and procedures to see what are some of the industry standards, how is this working, how is this not working for us. This is something that from the earliest onset of me coming in, I had flagged as something that we need to review, because I do think that there are some of our processes and our development review system that are a little cumbersome, and this, I believe, is one of them. I do believe that we can create an efficient system where a developer can hire their own engineer and we review it and we still meet all of our standards and follow all of our laws. I believe that can happen, but I can understand that we haven't always done that, and there is probably fear in changing that. I think allowing for this 43 lot to see how this goes, and then from that start the conversation, as you're suggesting, Councilmember Valento, continuing that conversation, because I don't want to keep coming back and asking for waivers either. I want to have these conversations of what works for Forest Lake and what's going to help actually encourage and keep development moving along. We haven't been developing like a lot of our other peers. I've said that from the beginning. And we need to review these things to see if these are part of what is actually deterring us from growing and developing in the ways we probably could. So that being said, yes, it is hands down a conversation that I want to have, but I do also want the opportunity for us to see, can we do it this way, and does it make sense? I don't know that we could have that same conversation in another few months if we didn't give them this waiver.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And then I think there's, my one other concern then too would be if it is gonna be starting that conversation and seeing how it goes, what does staff do if more developers come in tomorrow? You know what I mean?
We won't.
So, but even if we won't, I think having an internal conversation of if that happens, because then there's gonna be a window from this conversation until we make a final decision on the policy, and what is that internal policy going to be? Because it has to be consistent.
So I think that can, Mayor, to your point about having administrators seated, I think that's very important to help us guide us through that conversation. And hopefully that's in place here in a couple months, and we can move forward quickly. Mr. Bergman has a great reputation here. I think he'd do a great project on this, and I say that we allow this to happen on this project here, and then get a bigger conversation with staff going as soon as possible.
Just know that every city engineer gets ripped on in every city, and they all complain that development is difficult. And I've heard the same thing in my previous community, that development is scared away because of the engineer. So I just want to say that in defense of whatever Ryan's doing and whatever decision you're making here, I promise you'll still have complaints.
We'll come to any workshop when you want to pick it up and
Thank
then
you.
have the next dialogue. I mean, we're all in, right?
Perfect.
Yeah, we don't want to see it one off either, but we need to keep moving.
Yeah, agree. Christina, Abby, do you have what you need for next steps on this?
I do. Something will come back before you to memorialize that decision.
Perfect. Appreciate you being here this evening.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank
the
you for your
opportunity to
time.
talk. Okay, our final discussion item this evening, consideration of the Parks Commission ordinance, and Abby.
Thank you, Mayor Bain, members of the council. So at the direction of the city council, staff has been soliciting applicants for the Parks and Recreation Commission. To date, we've actually received 5 applicants. Additionally, one of the former Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commissioner has expressed interest. We think both of the 2 remaining are still interested, but prior to moving forward with kind of scheduling interviews and potentially seating applicants and citizen volunteers, staff thought it would be important to review the Parks and Recreation Commission ordinance. And this is for a number of reasons. That is not. Oh. Yeah, that's.
Must be on podium clear.
This is for a couple of reasons. First, 18 months ago, we had a quorum of our then Parks Commission quit. And clearly there were systems that were failing our citizen volunteers. We don't want to create a new system like that again. DDA staffing study that came out this end of last year indicated that we need to clearly define from a park and recreation perspective what we're doing before we make some more big changes in this arena. Events, programming, partnership, parks maintenance, facilities. I would add the commission in there, right? Like seating 7 citizen volunteers in roles that we're maybe not sure what exactly are appropriate. Definitely a reason to reevaluate. It was just less than a little over a year ago, less than a year ago, that we did a full rewrite of that ordinance at direction of prior staff, really taking a look at that ordinance and seeing what is appropriate, what's going to fit for a new commission. And then lastly, the new ordinance requires a 7-member commission, 5 citizens, and then 1 each a representative from the Forest Lake Area School District and the Forest Lake Area Athletic Association. In talking with our partners at the school district and athletic association, seating those 2 positions as voting members can be a little challenging. Those are 3-year terms. Some of the staff, just the idea of seating staff for 3 years for another commission. So one of the things that we wanted to talk with you tonight was about the potential for seating them as ex officio members, similar to the EDA that we have our chamber partner and our county EDA staff that are here. They're subject matter experts. We call on them. We ask them for updates. They're part of the dialogue, but then the decision-making comes down to the appointed officials. I'm going to try to just pull this up again. I have a quick thing to guide clerk. Yeah. Here we go. Ironically not coming up. Oh, there we go. So just a little bit of commission history that was in there. We had our first parks body approved in 1967. So that was for the Village of Forest Lake. And from the very beginning, our parks body had the authority to acquire land, park purposes. They had full and absolute exclusive control over properties set aside for park purposes. That was the park board that was there in that time. It could make contracts and leases for the construction and operation of park facilities, as well as employ its own people. That ordinance stayed in effect for a long time. In 1973, there were some different amendments over the years, but in 1973, The Ordinance 239 was where we added in the musical and free entertainment for the general public, provided funds were available, and then required a comprehensive plan, 5-year capital program. It's a reminder that Parks Board structure remained in place until 2015. So it was a very long time that that parks body was really operating independently in a lot of ways from the council and had their own authority. So in 2015, we adopted a park commission ordinance, seated a new commission, but then just within a matter of a little over a handful of years, the commission quit, so. Commission duties of the current ordinance, they would advise the council on matters related to the park, including expansion plans and development, updates to the park system, park plans, propose special public events and partnered recreation programs, parkland dedication requirements, and then annual fee schedule changes. And they would assist staff in understanding attitudes and concerns of citizens, and that would be for parks, events, and partnered recreation programs. They would have engagement with a variety of internal and external stakeholders, quality and variety of special events, monitor industry trends, engage positive public interest, feasible method for discouraging vandalism, and holding public meetings. There's a little bit of a uniqueness in our city code. We embedded right into our city code some duties of both staff in the community development department and the public works department. And I remember sitting right in front of you a little over a year ago and saying, this is not common. But I think at the time we thought we needed to write down what was happening of the administration of parks, because we wanted to really call out who was doing what and how do we keep things moving afloat for a while. So Community Development Department, we're orientating and onboarding commission members, we're keeping commissioners informed, we're preparing agendas and minutes and getting everything, meetings ready. We plan and execute special public events for the city. We coordinate applications for privately organized public events, assist with park system development and planning, assist with development and maintenance, and then manage the system's programming budget. Public Works, however, oversees the ongoing maintenance of the park system. They keep the commission informed on maintenance needs. They carry out construction and development. They develop and maintain park system capital improvement and maintenance plans, manage the park's maintenance budget. So just as a reminder, as a heads up, these are the staff duties that were occurring before we even wrote that ordinance, right? And as a side note, Dave's job description, my job description, Jamie's job description, don't necessarily reflect these things, right? What we're doing is all over on the board in parks. Commission management in general, this idea of joint administration and management is really uncommon. So Empire Township and Wyoming were two peer communities our former Parks, Trails, Lakes Commission had identified. Other than that, Hugo, out of our peer communities, is the only one that kind of has this joint administration model. Otherwise, standalone departments, Elk River, Farmington, Hastings, Rosemont, and then otherwise, many communities have parks in Public Works or a facilities department. They really look at Public Works as being the holder of those lands, right? For those standalone departments, they tend to have more programming efforts. For those Public Works facilities, they tend to offer the facilities, but not necessarily have any programming. So that's just a high level of where we've been. So all of this tonight is just to get some ideas on policy-related discussions. Let's see if these things are going to necessarily need to trigger any ordinance changes, but definitely can help us better onboard our volunteers when they've got a better understanding, when we all have a better understanding of their role, staff's role in some of these policy-based discussions. So I bring up events right away because as the council has recently seen, we've had 36, 40 events in the community, public events, not always publicly planned, some small, some large. And right now the code really says that the Parks and Recreation Commission would plan and execute events. So would you like the Parks and Recreation Commission to continue to plan and execute events? And maybe to piggyback on that, or does the council think that this could maybe be, largely administratively functioned? Maybe it doesn't go through this commission at all. And I'm going to kind of walk you through some questions. I should have prepped you for that.
The three events you're talking about is the, remind me, please.
Well, so the events that the city plans and executes are Spring Fling, Arts in the Park, and Hometown Holiday. So the question is, do you want the Parks and Recreation Commission to continue to plan and execute those events, any events?
Well, Arts in the Park is more of a series of events, right?
Yeah.
I'm a little, so I look at this question a little bit like I look at what we do here on council. And so it's not that the answer is no involvement, but also I think it's to the extent of what are we talking about for, to plan and execute events. And certainly if there are community member concerns about the quality of, I don't know, entertainment at Arts in the Park, or if there's ideas on how things could be better, I think that's naturally a home for those things to go to. But I'm challenged in, is that their primary purpose? No. And, plan and execute. I mean, they are certainly it's kind of like it's similar to what we do here on council versus street projects, for example. We don't execute anything. We make some policy decisions. We approve some funding. We provide we have input certainly to who's around the table to manage. And I know we've had very engaged committee members in the past, which is lovely, but I don't, the details of actually executing the event, I don't see that as part of their role. I see it more as they are advising and they are making sure that staff is, community, we're reflecting the community and that we're executing well, but I wouldn't see them as actual, hands-on executing beyond if somebody wants to volunteer and shuck some corn, that's lovely.
I think I saw some heads nodding, but I would.
Well, I would think too, maybe like kind of a post-event review with them to seek their feedback or improvements. What were they hearing from the, other citizens? So, I think that'd be an important role to play for sure. But yeah, I would agree. It's more of an advisory post and, after, but not execution.
Okay, so.
Can I just add one quick comment too? Just, I think everything was, I agree with that, definitely. And I think even though these are the three events that we have for community, just as times change and evolve, are they still working? Are they not? And getting feedback from people sitting on an advisory commission of suggesting changes or filling some gaps in the community. We might not always have Arts in the Park, Hometown Holiday, and the Spring Fling. It might change and evolve, and I think just having those opinions from what they might see at other communities that they attend, different events that they go to, so that we can continue to be innovative and provide the community with like new and exciting offerings, pending that there's the support of council to do so.
Would the council like the commission to review some or all public or private events on public land? So some good examples, things like the Ragnar race. It's on public trails. It happens in a public park. Does our park commission need to see them? Are you guys comfortable with an approach that maybe they weigh in on staff's review? You have a park staff. One thing that I know had been discussed at one point is that they review new applications for impacts to the system, and that gets weighed in if there needs to be something that comes before you. Some of this starts to creep into what we need to do with events in the future. But then the other question is, like the Mallard Street Dance. Right now, outdoor outdoor entertainment would just have gone to the council, but something like that wouldn't have. As it sits right now, I don't think the code necessarily is distinguishing between those public and private lands. Would you have envisioned our Parks Commission having a role in that? In the review of a public event on private land?
I won't.
I would not. I mean, yeah, I
That's fine.
would,
Yeah.
I would not.
And these are
I'm
the-
trying to define that further.
I think Mallory's is a really good example, right? It's completely privately organized, private property. But right now, I don't know that the code is well defined like that, right? And so we really need to make sure that as we're putting in new commissioners and maybe looking at some ordinance amendments in events as well as parks, that everything is jiving together so that we don't have
So just point
misunderstanding.
of clarification. So are we looking at the last question? Would it review any public or private events on private
I
lands?
guess I kind of moved into that one.
I mean, did we talk about on public lands? Is there, I mean, it sounds like there's a distinction.
I think it started in public lands and then skipped to private lands. And I'm really sorry because it's 10 to a quarter to 10 at night.
Huh?
Kind of a big agenda item. I'm wondering if 10 o'clock at night is the right time to tackle this. This is only one of many things.
No, yeah, that is just fine if you'd like to. This was,
So here's maybe my quarter to 10 thoughts on this topic. I look at this a little bit like I'm questioning myself on some of these questions, and I appreciate that they're coming up because we have vague or incomplete, and we're getting ready to seat a new commission. What weighs on me is we just rewrote this ordinance and we haven't seated a new commission, and also we have an open city administrator position where I just feel like there are a lot of, yes, there's a lot of moving pieces today, but there's going to be a lot more moving pieces. And I'm not sure that now is the right time for us to make an ordinance amendment. I feel that time is our friend, and that if we kind of take the current ordinance that we have, and yes, it's imperfect, and we knew that when we passed it, we knew it was a bridge to something else. I'm not sure that I know right now tonight what that future ordinance should look like. And so part of me feels that we should get a commission seated, get started on some of just the basics that we know we're missing. And I think some of these other questions that are important will start to become clear as to what we should do. It feels a little cart before the horse. Or maybe we have incomplete information. Commission coming on board, seeing that operation, and
I don't know necessarily that the ordinance needs to be changed. I just don't want to bring on a new commission and have inappropriate roles defined. That would be one concern, that we need to onboard a commission. And I think more than anything, the policy discussions around events need to be addressed to make sure that we're not putting those volunteer commissioners in roles that are inappropriate and that we wouldn't want to continue. So knowing that, maybe the best thing to do is to table this conversation. If that is until a new commissioner or a new administrator is seated, I think that that's fine. I just don't know what, it's just another voice in the mix.
I was just gonna say, I guess, the goal, everybody on this here said we want to get a commission seated. I think Abby's point is we need to make sure that we're setting proper expectations.
Agree.
And then there's also feedback from our partnering organizations that what we've put in our policy is probably not a good fit from a voting time here. So, I don't know that we, necessarily need the administrator to kind of work through some of that stuff.
And the reason I default to the administrator role is I feel like there's a lot of management nuance in much like the conversation we just had about engineering, of there are lots of different combinations of these types of questions that could be successful. And what is going to ultimately be successful for Forest Lake is what we're doing. And I just see staff is so critical in that role, that I appreciate weighing in and want the, future commission to be successful. But, and maybe I'm just not asking the right question. Maybe I should just be saying, what's staff's recommendation? Because again, I just see that there's so many paths that could be successful that.
Mayor Bain, if I may, just having led the commission in the past, and seeing this new ordinance come into place, the desire to seat a new commission, I know that there's some great applicants that have come forward. I feel that in lieu of really diving into the ordinance and what may or may not need to be changed from the last revisions, I think a suitable solution could potentially just be to set clear expectations in the first 6 months of here are the top 3 things you're going to focus on. Policy development for the pickleball courts. What are other communities doing? What should we implement? Item 2, you're going to, be a part of Arts in the Park, help guide, get into the community, get to learn the system. Number 3, go visit all the parks. I'm just throwing out a few there, but really set the stage of just that introductory, here are your few things that you're only needing to really focus on. And I think at a staff level, the budget conversations are going to come up. There's going to be capital improvement planning, and let them know in that process that explain it to them. This is the process, but it's staff-led and driven, where they can then chime in on, oh, well, I heard Summerfield Park really needs XYZ, and that's listed in 26. Maybe that could change. I don't know, but I think that there could be enough direction with a new commission seated in a very concise way to provide that if you desire to continue to move forward without diving into the full ordinance policy. I think that is obtainable.
But if you have an ordinance in place, that is not something that you want your Parks Commission folks to do, events, for example, since we've been talking about them. And people are reading your ordinance and they're applying to be in the Parks Commission because they want to be heavily involved, right? I think that's where Abby was trying to get some directions that, even if you're not changing the ordinance, we can at least have that conversation with folks about what they should be expecting, as opposed to they read something there. And maybe the compromise is that this has to get set aside and we put together that work plan for the rest of this year, and council blesses that, and that's all that the Parks Commission works on for this year. Some of those things that Jamie said, and onboarding, and obviously budget stuff will take up most of their time this year, but that's why we brought this forward, is because we don't want to have people have a certain expectation of what they're signing up for and then change it. We thought it would be best to let them know ahead of time what they should be planning to do, planning to have conversations about,
Yeah, I think these are all really good questions too.
Is there room on next week's workshop agenda to pick this up?
I think we should.
Yeah, if not there for sure on the 22nd, we don't have any discussion topics yet, so. We don't add any.
We have to do it sooner rather than later, yeah. And it's like having a job description, right? It should reflect the job, and we should be as accurate as possible. What's frustrating is that we just did it, so.
Can I just note something that when I pieced together some of the history for this staff memo, I went back to the staff memo I prepared for you last year with the new ordinance that former city administrator Casey had helped develop, and I think Amanda and I had worked on. In my memo, it referenced the operating authority that was in the code. It looks to me that quite possibly we never just sent the ordinance that repealed the park board and replaced it with the commission to our online codification firm. And then we created this whole new ordinance. So possibly what I can do is pull together a little bit more information for you on the ordinance that I do believe was supposed to be governing our commission, and the existing one, so you can take a look. Have a few of these more policy discussions. Not all of these policy discussions are going to feed into an ordinance amendment. Some of them are these kind of other special events stuff that we kind of need to do. some of it's just kind of getting you thinking about what is the park system of our future, because those are things we've said we were going to talk about, and we really need to, especially if we're going to bring in 7 more citizen volunteers.
Okay.
I think something that would help me in the conversation for the next time we discuss it is maybe giving some examples for the like events. Whether it's on private land or public land, or like the dance at Mallard's, that was helpful, just so that we can visualize it beforehand.
Yeah.
And tonight was just a very aggressive agenda too, so we should probably just acknowledge some of this may just be, it's 10 p.m. and
I am
our tomorrow selves at 9 a.m. will have all sorts of bright thoughts, and we can revisit this topic at another meeting, so. There is a reason we have a curfew. Shall we transition to staff updates?
You want to start with me?
Give us staff
The only update I have for you, well, 2 of them. One, the Wednesday night, the Planning Commission will hear a zoning code amendment. It's a repeal and replace of our existing zoning code, but it is not changing any zoning code policies. It is reformatting the zoning code, kind of trying to get like with like. One of the biggest challenges that we've had in our analysis of the zoning code is there's a little bit over here and a little bit over here and things buried in here, and really trying to get everything together to be able to really then start to look at updates to improve the zoning code. That'll come back before you in 2 weeks. So just wanted to at least let you know, if you saw a full repeal and replace out there, that's what that is. And then I can finally say this in public. Chase Bank has made an application to go into the old KFC.
Wow.
So if anybody
that
in the
again.
online world is watching us live, now we all have an answer of what's going to happen in the KFC. So.
Wow. That is the headline of the.
You like that?
Well done.
Wait until 10 o'clock.
Jamie.
No further updates tonight, thank you.
Very good. Christina.
Mayor and Council, next Monday will be a long day for you again. It starts at 4:30 with the Eureka Open House that I'll let Ryan talk about, and then you have the local Board of Appeals and Equalization at 5:30 up in the community room, and then we'll actually have to have our work session down here just with everything that's going on. So another long night, and then, but on a positive side, our new city clerk starts on Monday, so she will be here to help us through all of that. We're excited to have her join us.
Fabulous. Amanda.
Yes, Your Honor, just a reminder that the application for the city administrator position closes on April 23rd, and then there'll be some behind-the-scenes work from DDA to finalize the applicants to the semifinalists, and then that's when council will step in, and there'll be video interviews and a whole bunch of things that will happen after that. So April 23rd is the cutoff for the applications.
And council's next action on that is not anticipated until May 13th, is that right? That is our first meeting in May?
Correct. You will have video interviews that you will be sent prior to that.
Right.
But yes, the first meeting event will be on May 13th.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
A couple updates. 12th Street Southwest, as you've probably seen, has been shut down. A bunch of stuff over the internet. They're gonna be shut the water down in about 2 minutes. So Public Works and Bolton Mank are there doing inspections on the shutdown. So they'll be there overnight, getting that cut in and then paved back. They have Northwest asphalt lined up to pave that in the morning, and as soon as it's paved in, it'll be open back up. So I think it's been going decently well. It's a lot of work that they're trying to jam in a few hours, so everybody's working pretty hard there. Second update is the compost site. As far as the sewer and water extensions to the new Northern Waste site, the water line is going to get bored underneath County Road 50 and then attached on Tuesday and Wednesday, or tomorrow and Wednesday, and then they'll start running south to the new site. The tentative plan is having the compost site open on the 20th of April. That's on the website as the opening. If that changes, if they can't get the site restored in time, we will update that. But that is, the tentative plan is that Saturday the 20th. sounds like about a week to get it in, and it'll give us about 3 days to prep it, so hopefully we can make that work. But that's the plan, and if it changes, we'll put up a reader board and on Facebook and stuff to update that.
Perfect. Thank you. Ryan?
Mayor, City Council, just kind of a quick recap for tonight. We had a public open house for County State Aid Highway 32. Basically, the purpose of that open house was just to feel if there's any pushback on their current proposed alignments and the realignment of Forest Road. And there's just still the one resident that showed up. We had some fairly decent attendance. Obviously, it was not as big as previously, but like I said, just the one resident that showed up that was still not in favor of the proposed project. We are actually meeting with that property owner on April 17th. Pre-con for the 2024 street pavement maintenance project is scheduled for Tuesday, April 25th. Monday with Eureka Avenue. Yes, we will start the public open house right here in the small room in the hallway at 4:30. We do plan on doing a presentation on the project at 5:15, and then we'll kind of go into Q&A, kind of what you saw upstairs. We do plan on presenting that same presentation at the April 22nd City Council meeting too. I just want to say a couple points, tonight. Obviously, I'm willing to support the city and however you guys want to move forward, but I just want to clarify a couple things. We do not pick the contractor. They did pick the contractor. We had nothing to do with that. I do submit an estimate to the developer what it's going to cost, so I do not have an open checkbook, and I am on the last one that we had to submit for revised plans, when we went to the reduced streets, I'm about 9,600 below what I quoted them. And on the construction side, I'm almost just under 30,000 under what I quoted. So I had checks and balances through this project, no matter which way we go, we always do, because you've been involved on the backside of things on some other projects, and once we go through the detail, you see how much encumbering time that is. But again, at the end of the day, we have to continue to watch out for the best interest of the city. And it's not just Bolton Mink doing it, we're doing it on behalf of Public Works, Fire Chief, on placement of stuff, material types. If we get a wrong hydrant on a job, none of his equipment will hook up to that hydrant with their hoses. So there's a lot of things that go into these projects. But again, at the end of the day, whatever partnership you guys want to move forward on these projects, we've always been flexible. We're not here to look at one project. We have plenty of other work we could go be working on out in the industry, but we do provide a very talented and experienced team that has a lot of development experience. And you made a comment about Woodbury tonight. We do Woodbury's developments. So I just want to get some of that stuff out there so you guys have a better, comfortable feeling of, and that trust continues with consultants, because, you can get a bad reputation really fast on some stuff if we're not accurate. And I just want to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief
Mayor and
Newman.
Council, I just have one update for tonight. Tomorrow, we take delivery of our engine tender that was ordered just shy of 2 years ago. And with bringing that tender in, once we receive it, it'll take us about a month and a half to put that to service. There's driving training, pumping training, and then we have 7 firefighters in fire apparatus operator class that started last week, and they will be training on that truck. And with that truck, we will be able to surplus 2 other trucks. So we'll have some room in the fire department again.
You need volunteers to drive it into town?
We've got
Rock, paper, scissors, that real fast up here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Kevin?
There's one quick update. I got confirmation that the first quarter utility bills went out via email tonight, so the ones that get them paperless, they should be in their email inboxes. The ones that get them in the mail should be getting them later this week, maybe the weekend, maybe Monday. Our printer company has a 48-hour turnaround, so that's depending on when they get that out. So let's encourage residents to give us a call if they have any questions on their bills.
Thank you, Kevin. Transition to council updates. Councilmember Roberts?
Nothing tonight.
Councilmember Valento?
Nothing for me.
Councilmember Erickson?
Nothing tonight.
No. Nothing here either as far as updates. Just a note, I know tonight's agenda has gotten really long, or, the agenda was long. It was a packed meeting. Some of us were here for the neighborhood meeting starting at 4:30 and then transitioned to EDA. I'm always open to feedback, and we accommodated a lot of public comment tonight, which can be good, but it also means that we end up with long meetings. And so I'm always open to feedback on managing agenda times, managing format, accommodating public feedback, but also getting out of here at a acceptable hour. And so tonight got a little longer than we would like, but it's always a balance, and I'm open to feedback as we go here and try to find the right mix of engaging in some conversation and getting into a little bit more detail in an agenda topic. Maybe one of the, and Christine and I have this conversation all the time, and we both knew that this was a lot for tonight. So it's always an imperfect science, but just want to be really respectful of everyone's time and really appreciate everyone hanging out here till after 10 p.m. With that, that is the end of our planned agenda. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, and we're adjourned.